It should be blue skies, it should be blazing sunshine, it should be baking heat. It was about 25 degrees here yesterday and the day before. Look what it's like now. I wouldn't like to be a driver in those conditions, particularly anybody other than Damon Hill, because if Hill gets away smartly from pole position on the left-hand side of the grid, he will be in a very strong position. Villeneuve, of course, is not used to wet weather starts. This is only his 7th Grand Prix, and he's used to Indy racing in America, where the conditions are such that they don't start if it's wet. There are the first 3 rows of the grid, and as you can see, Eddie Irvine in the second Ferrari is 6th. That's the top Jordan, Barrichello. The Monaco winner, Parnis, is well up for a change, 8th on the grid. The first McLaren is in 10th place. Johnny Herbert is ahead of Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who's in the spare car. Mika Salo in the second Tyrrell. David Coulthard down in 14th place, an ex-Grand Prix winner. There are 8 Grand Prix winners in this race. Martin Brundle, sadly, is not one of them. And there are only 20 starters because neither of the 240 cars of Andrea Montermini and Luca Badoer qualified yesterday within the 107% of the pole time limit. So 20 cars on the grid, 65 laps, and it's literally anybody's guess, because they should be much closer to each other in this race than they normally are in a dry one.
Now, until this morning, it had been dry throughout the couple of days of practice and qualifying here, and during those days of driving and testing the cars, the main thing that came up was just how crucial tyres were going to be in the dry, because with these long corners, 180 degrees, the tyres get worked very hard indeed, and drivers were having a lot of problems keeping them in good condition, and that was going to be a crucial element here in the race. It was going to be either 2 stops or 3. But in qualifying yesterday, Damon Hill was in superb form, but otherwise we saw things in the pecking order pretty much as per normal. The ones who did do well, though, were Olivier Panis. He's qualified extremely well in that 8th position, buoyed, no doubt, by his confidence increased from the Monaco win. And Johnny Herbert out qualifying Heinz-Harald Frentzen for the first time and having his best qualifying position of the year in 9th, whilst someone who was not so happy was David Coulthard, who after his run of great results, being in the top 6 for the last 3 Grand Prix, has slumped back down to 14th after having handling problems with his McLaren. But on waking up today and seeing the rain set in, I'm sure hearts must have sunk all over the place, because I know from my days of driving that after one spent 2 days working with your car, gradually honing the balance, changing the springs, changing the roll bars, tweaking the wings, to get yourself in a state when you know how it's going to look in the race and how it's going to feel, and to be perfectly balanced, or as near as you can. When it comes to, we're looking at, that's Bernie Eccleston in the brown jacket, we're looking at him there. He's Juan Carlos there with him, and obviously getting ready for the race to start. But then when the rain comes down, all of that goes out of the window, and it's very much a case of making the best of a bad job, and it's very easy to feel that all your hard work from both driving, setting up and engineers is going to go out of the window. It's a completely different ball game now, and indeed I bumped into David Coulthard on the way up to the commentary box, and he said, "You're about the same size as me." He said, "How do you fancy jumping in?" I said, "No, thank you."
King Juan Carlos of Spain here to watch the Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona. We wish we had a better day for him, and of course for the drivers. It's going to be very, very tough indeed for them. I've seen conditions worse than this, but this is quite bad enough. There was that terrible time in Australia when the race only lasted 14 laps. The conditions were so extreme. But this track is a 13-corner circuit, just under 3 miles long. As I said earlier on, the drivers like it very much. It's got a very, very fast straight. And you probably remember those magnificent pictures we had of Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell in respectively the McLaren and the Williams battling for the lead and going into that first corner from about 190 miles an hour, absolutely together, until Senna gave way and let Mansell through. Right, so are we going to see that sort of situation here? It could well be, because Michael Schumacher will be going for his first win for Ferrari.
Well, away the cars peel, and significantly they are not led by the safety car. Now that means we're going to see the Spanish Grand Prix starting as it should do, as hopefully we did expect, without the safety car. And the reason that it was contemplated, I think, may become clear as we look down the main straight here in Spain, because this first long straight, and that's Mikel Salo there is left standing. Damon Hill leads the field away, followed by Jacques Villeneuve. There's Michael Schumacher in the gloom. You can see just how gloomy it is. The straight, we can see it now, is very, very long on this track. Now that means that the start is going to be particularly hazardous because the spray is going to be enormous as the cars accelerate up to about 170 miles an hour all the way down that main straight. They're going to be very closely compacted, of course, off the line. It's going to be really immensely tricky. Salo being pushed out of the way. Will they be able to start the Tyrrell here? And he'll maybe start the race from the pit lane after the others have all moved away. There's one of the Benettons. But start's going to be very, very crucial because as the straight is so long, if anybody gets an advantage, and let's not forget that our best starter of the year is David Coulthard, who normally makes up a couple of places. Martin Brundle starts very well too, as does Johnny Herbert. Those three tend to be the good starters. Jos Verstappen. Now, significantly, Michael Schumacher hasn't started well. He's never actually made up a place off the line. And he's got the two Benettons right behind him, so we need to look carefully at that. Eddie Irvine, he did a good job in qualifying, I must say, just 0.8 of a second away from Michael Schumacher. But I'm sure Damon Hill's going to be in the best situation there, right out in front. We may well see a repeat of the start sort of format that we had in Brazil, when Hill was able to peel away, making best use of his clear visibility. Just look how wet it is. This is a dreadful situation for the drivers, and I would expect away from the lights as they go down to that first corner, many will be coming off full throttle, many will be backing off using part throttle, just only going as fast as they dare and as fast as they can see ahead of them, and that's not going to be very far. A twisty track, an undulating track, and it looks, I can tell you, when you get out there on the circuit, a lot more undulating than we see from the television pictures. They're coming down now towards the grid. That's a very, very fast corner. This one onto the straight, 130, 40 miles an hour. That is where Heinz-Harald Frentzen lost it. He spun off and clouted the tyre wall on the inside of the track. Coming up to take their positions, and the spray is going to make it very hard for them to see. It's going to make it very hard for us to see what goes on as well.
So, Damon Hill in pole position. Behind him is Jacques Villeneuve, just to the right. Behind Damon Hill immediately is the Ferrari. I remind you that when all the 5 red lights go out, the race will start. And everybody is threading their way up into position now, round the last corner. 20 cars to start, with the 2 40s having failed to qualify, and Damon Hill has got a tremendous opportunity, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go! And Hill is away well. Tucked up behind him is the Benetton, and Michael Schumacher has been left at the start. And there's a jostling for position as they go into the first right-hander coming towards us. It is a Williams in the lead. Behind him is the Benetton, and it's Jacques Villeneuve who is leading. He's got ahead of Damon Hill, and so has Jean Alesi. Gerhard Berger is in 4th position in the second Benetton. So a magnificent start by the young Canadian who's not used to these conditions and who lost 45 minutes of practice time yesterday to set up his car. Now he has got the advantage that we expected Damon Hill to have, and Jean Alesi, who has had so many collisions this year, is in a good position in this race because he's only got 1 car in front of him, and off goes, it looks like one of the Minardis to me, and still it is Villeneuve leading. It is Alesi in 2nd position. It is in 3rd position. It's Pedro Lamy who's gone out. Pedro Lamy off on the first lap, even before the first corner. Now, whether there was a coming together or not, I don't know, but anyway, he's out, and Villeneuve leads, and Alesi is 2nd, and Hill is 3rd, and we're with the lead car now of Canadian Jacques Villeneuve, who, of course, won the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, which was only his 4th Grand Prix. This is only his 7th. The reigning IndyCar champion, and he's got everybody behind him here in Spain as he's coming through towards the end of his first lap. Now, he's getting away, and Damon Hill will desperately want to get together with Jean Alesi, not literally, but to get past him. Hill goes past in third position, and Coulthard is out, and the left front wheel is missing off the McLaren. Villeneuve leads, Alesi second, Hill is third, and that must have been it. Coulthard must have collided with Pedro Lamy. And coming towards us now is Fissy Keller, and you can see, look at his left front wing, and he's got a puncture, I think, on the left front wheel. It's wobbling very badly indeed. So 3 cars out from the 20 who started, only 17 running. On this, the second lap, with Gerhard Berger in third position. Eddie Irvine is Berger fourth, Irvine is fifth, and Schumacher is behind his teammate down in sixth position. What a start!
Well, a pretty good start, bearing in mind the conditions, but it looks clear that we did have David Coulthard and the 2 Minardis involved in that first straight, I think it was, the first straight collision there, clearly putting out Coulthard with quite a big impact. So he out of the race. Meanwhile, Olivier Panis has come into the pits straight away. He's getting out of the car. That suddenly he's got a mechanical problem, or perhaps he's been touched and has got some bed suspension. That was a shame, because Panis this morning was third in the warm-up, going very well indeed. But a great start from Jacques Villeneuve. These conditions are completely new to everybody. No one has had the chance to do a wet start before, and Jacques Villeneuve judged it to perfection. But Alesi made a stormer, up from fourth on the grid there to the second spot. And once again, Ferraris just weren't starting well, particularly Schumacher. And Schumacher, let's have another look. Here we go. Now, look at Schumacher on your right. Second behind. He's really delays. Berger pops out behind him. Alesi is tucked up behind Villeneuve. Then we've got Irvine's Ferrari, Barrichello. Another look. Look at Schumacher. He just stops. He does not get away for a long time. Now, there's going to be a story behind that. I don't know what it was. Maybe he had some kind of clutch problem. Now, let's look at Coulthard there. Coulthard is on the left. Well, sadly, we'd like to have seen a bit more of that, but our director took us away. And conditions extremely treacherous, and that's Eddie Irvine off in the Ferrari.
Yeah, Irvine out and Schumacher down in fifth position. Now, Schumacher was blaming his clutch for his bad start at Monaco. It's likely to have been that here again. But now we're on lap 3, and you can see the battle for the lead. It's Villeneuve in front. Behind him is Alesi, who's just gone fastest on the second lap. Damon Hill is third, and 2.5 seconds covers the first 3. Gerhard Berger is in fourth position, ahead of Michael Schumacher, and Rubens Barrichello is in the points at sixth position. It's early days to be talking about World Championship points, but Barrichello is there. Herbert is seventh. Heinz-Harald Frentzen in that spare Sauber after his terrific crash this morning is in eighth position, ahead of Martin Brundle. And so many people have already gone out. Pedro Lamy out, David Coulthard out, Panis into the pits. It's Monaco revisited in Spain, and there are, at the present moment, don't forget that Mika Salo was very late getting away indeed. There are about 16 cars left out of the 20 who started.
Conditions extremely treacherous, they really are, and Alesi's pushing hard. He's now set the fastest lap so far, and I suspect we may see a bit of a challenge from Alesi on Villeneuve. Villeneuve has not gone particularly well in the wet sessions that we've had through this year so far. Remember back to the Brazilian Grand Prix, Villeneuve was running in second. Let's have a look there. That's the one of the Jordan cars there, and just behind that is a spinner. I can't quite see who that is, and it's that is Herbert, Johnny Herbert in the Sauber. Now let's stay with him aloft, please, to see if he gets out of that gravel trap, or is he going to get bogged down. He's keeping it going. It looks like Herbert should be able to get back on. He's not damaged the car. There's his teammate, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, going by in his Sauber. Come on, Johnny, keep it going, keep your foot in. He needs just to keep that thing rolling. If it comes to a stop, he'll never get it away. And that looks like one of the Arrows, TW Arrows cars. Herbert back on the track there. But Villeneuve at the Brazilian Grand Prix went off in his battle with Alesi, and we could well see a repeat of this kind of situation here. Let's just hope this time both keep on the track. Villeneuve steps up his pace in reaction to that from Alesi.
Well, it's good news that Johnny Herbert managed to get back on the track, but it's bad safety news, because those gravel traps are supposed literally to stop the car, just a few feet in. But they're so wet that they've compacted down here today. It's given some grip. Herbert has regained the circuit. He's well down in comparison with where he went off. But Jacques Villeneuve looks as though he's driving a Williams-Renault motorboat at the present moment, with great roosters of spray coming up from his rear wheels, making it very difficult indeed for the man behind, which is Jean Alesi, to see, never mind to get past. There's the Benetton of Jean Alesi. That's the gap between Hill and Berger, who are third and fourth. and Damon Hill is 3.5 seconds behind Jacques Villeneuve, who is taking advantage of the comparatively clear vision situation he's got to go fastest. He's just gone round in 1 minute 52 seconds. And that is about 8 tenths. And Hill onto the grass now. Has he managed to keep going? It's Johnny Herbert managed to do so. Damon Hill spins off and he's keeping those wheels rolling. And Berger goes past up into third position. And Damon Hill rejoins. He's back in the race. Now that's the important thing. He's kept his momentum up. And Schumacher has got past as well. So Damon Hill has got it all to do now. But then so has Villeneuve.
The Williams team getting ready in case there's any damage to that car from Damon. This is a precautionary thing that he probably won't come in. I wouldn't think there is anything. I suspect the nose is being ready just in case, and that would be a sensible way to handle it. But you may well have wondered, looking at that, why did Damon drive along the gravel track for so long? Why not just get back on the track as soon as he could? The reason was that A, that was a slow motion replay, but secondly that if he tried to tug the car back on and steer too abruptly, he would have spun it. So he has to just ease the car back in gently, making use of the very, very tiny amounts of grip he's got.
So lap 5 out of 65, and Jacques Villeneuve leads Lacey, who is actually closing on him now. The gap is down to 1.4 seconds between first and second. But as I said earlier on, catching is one thing, getting past is another. You can see that Villeneuve is circumspectly tiptoeing round that left-hander, and you can also see that Jean Alesi is grasping his opportunity. He's much closer than 1.3 seconds now. Berger is some 6 seconds behind this battle for the lead, and Alesi is now right in the wheel tracks of Jacques Villeneuve's Williams Renault. Alesi, who finished second in Brazil, who led so well at Monaco, built a 20-second lead, only to see it disappear when a rear suspension spring broke. And Berger is still third. Schumacher is ahead of Hill, who is fifth. Barrichello is sixth, and Frentzen is moved up into seventh place, with Johnny Herbert down to 10th as a result of going off.
And tiptoeing really is the word, because with the very small amounts of grip, the track's very, very slippery. These cars with their 700 horsepower and weighing just 500 kilos, they can get wheel spin with a foot full of accelerator in third gear at 120 miles an hour. Now in the dry, they were using full throttle for about 60% of the lap. And when checking with the engineers after this morning's wet weather practice, I found that in the wet it only goes down to just 27%. So they use full throttle for less than half the amount in the wet. Just 1/4 of the whole lap can they be on full throttle, driving desperately carefully. Williams team, drama's over. Yes, he didn't need to come in. Hill continuing there in 5th place. But up the front, Villeneuve's going to really feel Alesi breathing down his neck. But in the dry, you can see where somebody is in your mirrors. But in the wet, he can't. And that's pretty unsettling, because Villeneuve will know perfectly well he's very close, and he won't be able to maneuver his car gently from side to side, making sure that he doesn't block Alesi, but just makes it a little bit difficult. And it could well be that Alesi in the next 5-6 laps will come, as far as Villeneuve's concerned, out of the gloom and spray alongside, and Villeneuve will have to concede the place. There we are, Villeneuve, a little bit of a twitch there. He's really being pressurised hard by Alesi, and Alesi is probably the best driver in the wet of anybody. It's a great skill, and his car control really does come into the fore here. Being able to wrestle with a car, doing 120 miles an hour, with it skidding sideways, wheel spinning, it's a very, very difficult part of Grand Prix racing.
Well, Alesi will probably be saying to himself, go carefully, Jean, because he's had collision after collision, and there is the Ferrari of Michael Schumacher, the fastest man on the track. His previous lap was 2 seconds faster than the 2 cars ahead of him. The genius of Michael Schumacher is making up for the deficiencies of the Ferrari, the handling deficiencies in the wet. He's got past Gerhard Berger, he's up into 3rd place, and he's right behind Villeneuve and Alesi, and will soon be challenging for the lead, with Alesi having this awful problem about trying to find the moment to get alongside and force his way past Jacques Villeneuve. But Villeneuve is a man who resists pressure superbly. Off goes the Jordan now. Is that Martin Brundle, or is it Rubens Barrichello? As you can see, like Hill and like Herbert, whoever it is keeping the car running. It looks like Martin Brundle to me. Martin Brundle rejoins the track, and Michael Schumacher is the first man today to lap in these wet conditions in under 1 minute 50 seconds. You just saw the time. You see the result. The 2 times world champion in his 7th race for Ferrari is battling for the lead now, with Alesi ahead of him in 2nd place, who drove for Ferrari last year, and the incredible Jacques Villeneuve in only his 7th Grand Prix for the Williams-Renault team. This is classic racing in appalling conditions, and you're seeing superb driving. Berger 4th, Hill is 5th. 12 seconds now behind his teammate Jacques Villeneuve, who leads the race. Rubens Barrichello is in 6th position. Frentzen is 7th. Verstappen is 8th. Johnny Herbert has gone up to 9th, of course, by passing Martin Brundle. In 11th position is Pedro Diniz in the 2nd Ligier. 12th is Hakkinen. David Coulthard is out of the race, so there's only one McLaren left. 13th is Katayama, the Japanese driver, and Schumacher is getting closer and closer and closer to Jean Alesi's Benetton Renault. There's first, second, third. It's as close as that. And this is lap 7 in this 65-lap Spanish Grand Prix.
Schumacher really piling on the pressure onto Alesi now, and this will be interesting to see whether or not the brilliance of the German will shine through. Can he find a way past Alesi when Alesi couldn't find a way past Villeneuve? And if Schumacher manages to do that and get by Alesi, will he be able to get by Villeneuve and into the lead? I think there's a pretty good chance, and Schumacher having a look to the inside. But watch the lines that they're taking through the corners, because on some corners they are cutting right across to the inside and taking what a normal dry line, but in that corner, for example, they're actually keeping wide, and that is because the conventional dry line round the inside, look how wide Schumacher goes there. Now that's not a mistake. The conventional dry line gets impregnated with rubber, and that becomes very slippery and smooth in the wet. Now by keeping wide off the conventional line, you run on clean, raw tarmac that has got more grip, and that's what drivers do to different ways, different extents on different corners. Look again, they're going around the outside. If that had been dry, you'd be on the inside, and they have to use these lines very carefully, but Schumacher looks to me to be all over the back of Alesi.
And I will tell you that Gerhard Berger, because of the way these three are fighting each other, in 4th place Berger is closing on Michael Schumacher and therefore Jean Alesi and therefore Jacques Villeneuve. There's Berger in the background. You can just see him coming out of the left-hander. He's pulling away from Damon Hill, who is in 5th position. But Hill was actually a bit quicker than Villeneuve on that particular lap. So the Canadian leads, the Frenchman is 2nd, the German is in 3rd place. It's an Austrian 4th, an Englishman 5th, and a Brazilian, Rubens Barrichello, in 6th place. The race of nations in Spain.
What's interesting is Villeneuve is actually holding up, not just Alesi and Schumacher, but if we look at the lap times, his last lap was a 1 minute 52.3, and Hill's off again!
Damon Hill off again! Now, is this the end? He's managed to regain the track, but that's the 2nd time Damon's gone off, and I was saying earlier on that he was likely to be the happiest man in terms of his car handling. I was expecting Schumacher to have problems, I was expecting Alesi to have problems, I was expecting Villeneuve to have them, and again Michael Schumacher dodges out from behind the rear wing of Jean Alesi's Benetton. And it's not the first three, it is Damon Hill who has got a problem, and Rubens Barrichello has passed him, and Damon is only in the top 6. And now there is Schumacher and Alesi. It's fantastic for 2nd position, and this is lap 9 in this 65-lap race. And Damon Hill is now down in 8th position. He's been passed by Frentzen, he's been passed by Verstappen, and Schumacher goes through, passes Jean Alesi and moves up into 2nd place with a bit of brilliant driving in these appalling conditions. Jean Alesi won't give up though. He was vying for the lead, now he's lost 2nd place, and Schumacher is going to be pushing the least experienced top Grand Prix driver. Here's a replay of Damon Hill. The car slides sideways. The back kicks out. You can see Barrichello in the background there, and you'll probably see the Jordan go through behind Damon Hill and move up into 5th position. Well, they stopped the footage, and there is Villeneuve now leading Schumacher in the Ferrari, and it's going to be a Ferrari in the lead before very much longer. I wouldn't be surprised, because Michael Schumacher is on a roll, and he's trying to go through and failing going to do so. They're leaving Jean Alesi behind them. And of course, Villeneuve will just about be able to see that scarlet shape through the rain behind him.
I don't think Schumacher will do much about Villeneuve at this point down the main straight, but where Schumacher is being so superb here is that he's driving with a great degree of intelligence, and he's really investigating to see where the grip is, and he's making use of these wide lines in a much more creative way than we saw from Jean Alesi, and he's finding areas of grip. He's positioning his car to line up low to overtake. At some places he seems to fall back from Villeneuve as he is there, but look how wide he's going. He's picking up grip all the way, and I think that it may well be during the course of this lap he keeps moving the car out. He's going wide again. This is such an important part of racing when you're trying to put down that 700 horsepower. There's Katayama on the right, out of the race. Ukyo Katayama having stopped. It's so important to try and pick up the little tiny bits of grip and then to use the momentum from using that grip to get on the accelerator earlier to then pull alongside an adversary. And I'm sure he's going to have Villeneuve very soon.
And Eddie Irvine's Ferrari has just been removed from the track. They've driven with it on the back of a truck just in front of me as I talk to you. So 2 Ferrari started, 1 Ferrari left. There it is, Michael Schumacher in second place. But just remember how Jacques Villeneuve in Australia at Melbourne in his very first Grand Prix resisted enormous pressure from his teammate Damon Hill until the closing stages of the race when he went off, damaged an oil pump, and therefore his engine, and Schumacher again has a look, and that is exactly what Villeneuve is having to do now. Resist constant pressure from the man he knows is the top racing driver of 1994 and 95, in the opinion of many people, one of the top racing drivers of all time, Michael Schumacher, in the V10 Ferrari, which has yet to win a race. Ferrari haven't won since Jean Alesi did so at Montreal in Canada last year. And Schumacher has been saying ever since this season began that he didn't really expect the Ferrari to be competitive until the Canadian Grand Prix halfway through the season. He was doing well in the San Marino Grand Prix. He didn't do well in Monaco, of course, but he started from pole position as he did at Imola. And Ferrari are actually producing new parts, particularly new aerodynamic parts, to make the car go even quicker in their constant quest for development. And I think it's going to be in winning shape before very much longer, as Villeneuve leading and Schumacher second on lap 11 out of 65, past Katayama's Tyrrell. Alesi is still third, Berger is fourth, so it's Benetton's in the top 4, both of them. Barrichello is in 5th position, Frentzen is 6th, Verstappen is 7th, and Damon Hill is in 8th place, and he's now 28 seconds behind race leader Jacques Villeneuve, and of course very much out of the points.
Well, it was a great shame for Eddie Irvine that he spun off so early in this race, because Irvine's done a pretty good job, I think, for Ferrari, and the team are pretty happy with him. The car itself is due indeed to have quite a hike in performance, probably not for the next Grand Prix in Montreal, but for the subsequent one in Manicourt. And it's Schumacher is getting so desperately close there. This is the point going into turn 10 that he always gets very close. There are now 2 faster corners, and it's very difficult to get by then, because it's on these faster corners when one does need to take pretty much the normal line, because apart from anything else they are not 180-degree corners when the wide lines are particularly relevant, but perhaps just 110 degrees, something like that. But as far as Ferrari are concerned, the engine is pretty good now. I think that's quite clear. Where the car is not so good is in its aerodynamic performance, and I think that is the area that they hope to improve it upon. Williams, meanwhile, are not standing still. They've got a new floor, that's the underside of the car, on for this race, and the big influence of that is potentially on the aerodynamics. I don't think it's a huge step. The Williams is too good for huge steps to come out of the bag these days, but it is still an advantage, and continuing to keep the Williams ahead, and they've been very dominant throughout the dry practice. But you know, watching Schumacher here, just watch the way his car shimmies as he's coming around these corners, and that's Damon Hill out!
Damon Hill out of the Spanish Grand Prix on lap 12. No points at Monaco, no points here in Spain. You can see how dejected he is, because quite apart from anything else, he's in the position of seeing his World Championship lead, and Schumacher is there with a clear track ahead of him, past Jacques Villeneuve. We didn't see the passing move, but we see the result of it, and Schumacher has brilliantly worked his way up from, first of all, third on the grid, then he dropped back into fifth position, and he now leads Jacques Villeneuve by nipping through on the inside, having looked, as Jonathan was saying, at all the possible line alternatives, looking for grip, and he's found it. This is very much the world champion at his best. There is the potential world champion Damon Hill for the second race in succession walking in, and here is the result of Damon. This is his third spin in the race.
And that is exactly what Heinz-Harald Frentzen did with rather worse results. That will have been quite a bang against that wall there. That will certainly damage the right front suspension. But I'm afraid this has been a poor race for Damon Hill. He started in pole. Now here's the Schumacher overtaking manoeuvre. He comes, this must surely be it, up the inside. This is, I think, where he got by Jean Alesi with the same manoeuvre, and that's often what one can do in the wet. You practice a manoeuvre on somebody. He knew that that worked on Alesi. He knew where he could find grip at the preceding corner, got the momentum and came by. But Damon Hill, I'm afraid, has not been on good form here today. That was what it must have looked like from Villeneuve's car. There goes Schumacher pulling out on his way. You know, he was on pole position. The Williams has been the class of the field in the dry, and quite frankly, it should have been in the wet. But after that start, in which Damon dropped back to third, Villeneuve got the line away. Damon just got rattled, and he made two mistakes. He went off twice and then made a third mistake. I'm afraid it really has rather gone to pieces on this occasion for him.
And this is a mark of the genius of Michael Schumacher, having got past Jacques Villeneuve with a clear track in front of him. His last lap was an incredible 4 seconds faster than that of Villeneuve. He's streaking away now, having got the advantage, having got the lead, having got clear conditions, knowing where the grip is and, more importantly, where the grip isn't. Michael Schumacher leads on lap 13 in Spain, and frankly, I think he only has to keep going, even at this stage of the race, to stay there and give Ferrari their first Grand Prix victory. Villeneuve is now 3 seconds behind him. You can see how difficult the conditions are, with the Ferrari writhing and wriggling as he turns in and puts the 700 horsepower down.
This is the sign of real genius here. Just look at the way that he controls that car, almost treating it with contempt. He's not fazed by the cars lining around. Ferrari crew looking on. It's going to be a long time, I think, before we see any pit stops. But the other sort of driver who would shine, sadly, in, if not distant memory, but certainly in memory these days, in these sort of conditions, would have been the late Ayrton Senna. He was another driver who just found such a margin of superiority in the wet. And the reason is that the wet conditions are a great leveller. They're a great leveller of cars. And generally, it's the car that makes the biggest difference in Formula One. It has to be said. The difference between the front-running car, like the Williams, and perhaps ones at the back, like the 40, is probably 5 seconds a lap. The difference between the very best drivers in Formula One and those at the back is about 1.5 seconds. And in the wet conditions, look at him just playing with that car with supreme confidence. It's just so rare to have a driver of such a level of ability that is so far above anybody else. And Schumacher does not have the best car here today. It's a pretty good car, the Ferrari, but the Benetton, I would suggest, and certainly the Williams, are at least as good. In the Williams case, probably better.
And you saw the people in the Ferrari garage delightedly looking at their monitors, which show them what you're looking at. Michael Schumacher in the lead. Over goes the cover on Damon Hill's Williams Renault, out of the race. No points again for the second race in succession. And Schumacher is now 6.6 seconds ahead of Jacques Villeneuve. But let's not take anything away from Jacques. This is a supremely good drive from someone who is still pretty unused to Grand Prix conditions and who has never raced at this circuit. He had 1 day of testing here in December when he was very, very new to Formula One, of course, and he lost 45 minutes, as I was saying earlier yesterday, in one of the practice sessions. So he was in many ways almost new to the Barcelona circuit, but now he's the full length of the straight behind Michael Schumacher, who's going faster and faster lap by lap. He's pulling away at the rate of 4 seconds a lap. On the previous lap, the gap was 6 seconds. This lap, it is 10 seconds. Alesi is 1.3 seconds in third place behind Jacques Villeneuve and 4 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger, his teammate. Barrichello is now up into 5th position on a possible 2 points. And Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who finished 4th at Monaco to score the Sauber team's first points of the year, is in the points again. He's in 6th place, 2 places ahead of Johnny Herbert, and Jos Verstappen, the Dutchman in the Arrow's heart, is sandwiched by the 2 Sauber Fords in 7th position.
Well, I must say, I'm surprised not to see Lacey find a way by Villeneuve. He's been stuck behind him for a long time now, and when we think that Schumacher is doing 1 minute 45s, Villeneuve 4 seconds slower, 1:49s, I'm sure Lacey can at least run in between the two on, say, a 1 minute 47. Maybe he's just being too careful, or maybe he's just being very careful, and that he does not want to risk the kind of tangles that he's had all too often this year. But on the other hand, I think he really should have tried to learn from Schumacher's lines, and it was the lines, the ingenuity, the creativity of Michael Schumacher in finding that elusive grip that has really helped him apart from his car control. Lacey's got the measure of car control, but what he hasn't done is cottoned on to what Schumacher was doing, and the evidence would have been in front of him, albeit for a lap or two. He could also have worked out where Schumacher got by Villeneuve and tried the same manoeuvre, even though Villeneuve may have been wise to it a second time round. But meanwhile, Schumacher continuing to pound around, setting new fastest laps of the race, lap by lap, lap 15, and he's now 10.5 seconds ahead.
But listen to this, lap times, Schumacher's last lap, 1 minute 45.5, Villeneuve 49.4, Lacey 49.4, Berger 49.1, Barrichello 49.1, Frentzen 49.6, and Verstappen 49.5, and so on down to Martin Brundle, who's just lapped in 1 minute 49 seconds, and he is in 9th place. So the lap times for 2nd to 9th are very, very close to each other. It's Michael Schumacher who's underlining his dominance all the time, and that of Ferrari, because 4 seconds a lap is the increase that he is making over Jacques Villeneuve in 2nd place. You're looking at the Canadian now, and behind him is Jean Lacey. So it's Ferrari leading on lap 16 out of 65. It's Benetton 2nd. Williams 2nd, and Benetton in 3rd position.
Absolutely right. The brilliance of Schumacher really is making the whole rest of the field look pretty second-rate. And there are considerable gaps between them further back. Lacey is being held up, that's for sure. He's the one who probably could go faster, and indeed should. But the rest of them have got a little bit of clear track, certainly enough to be putting in some faster laps if they could. And it's my guess that many of them are sticking to a fairly conventional or a few wide lines here or there, but really just haven't found the grip of Schumacher.
So, coming up to the halfway point of the season, and this is Verstappen's arrows spinning. I spoke a bit too soon. He's still very inexperienced, but he does a 360-degree turn and still manages to keep the car going in what is only his 21st Grand Prix, having driven for Benetton and Simtek last year. This year with the Arrows team, with the Hart V8 engine, Villeneuve crosses the line to go into his 17th lap with Lacey behind him. And it's still very close. But Lacey seemingly can do nothing about it. But he's got this constant wall of water being thrown up at him.
Well, they're on lap 17 now, 65-lap race, and had the conditions been dry, we would have seen the first few cars come into the pits for the first of what probably would have been 3 pit stops. It would have been, let's have a look, that's the Ligier Diniz that we're looking at, getting out of shape, running wide. He's destined for the gravel trap, I'm sure. Well, yes, he is. Now, he needs to keep his foot in, of course. Now, although the gravel trap should slow the cars down, it is a little bit tougher for the organisers, I must say, in the wet. And that's quite bright there. He goes around the outside and gets off the gooey gravel, gets on a bit of harder, compacted ground and grass, and gets himself back on the track. So, but normally we'd be seeing some pit stops. It would have been lap 21 if they were going for a 2-stop routine. So what, should we ask, what are they going to be doing in the wet? Well, what we tend to see is the teams will have filled the cars up pretty much to the brim, and that's just over half a race distance worth of fuel by and large. So I think we're going to see each of these drivers doing, looks like a Tyrrell, is it there? No, I think they're both out. Yes, it is a Tyrrell, it's Salo. Just about managed to spot that there, and Salo obviously started from the pit lane there. Has he kept it running? Yes, he has. Another bit of rally crossing will get him back on the track, probably with no damage. But he actually started in the spare car, we understand, in fact, so Salo was back down there in 12th. But back to the pit stops. We will expect, I think, just one stop in this race, and that's going to be round about lap 35, lap 40, I would have thought. And the teams would have filled these cars up. It is not as important to run them light in the wet, because in fact in the wet 2 things happen. The amount of detriment of performance in terms of lap times that you get from running heavy is nothing like as much as the dry. In some ways, having the more weight on the car can actually help the traction. Secondly, the tyres don't go off. All the time that we've got this amount of water on the track, the tyres are going to stay pretty constant, and so there is less to be gained by running the car lighter and making more pit stops. That's why one is going to be pretty much de rigueur, I think, for the whole field here today.
Ferrari have been working for what they hope is going to happen here as Schumacher comes up to lap Salo, who has just rejoined the track. Ferrari have been working for this situation for a very, very long time. They had all sorts of political internal problems in the team, but they've gradually put things right. But Tony Jardine is with Damon Hill. There he is. What happened?
Damon, filthy conditions, filthy luck.
Today was a bad day for me. I made 2 mistakes and then finally made a 3rd mistake. But I got to say, conditions, I'm almost pleased to be out of it, to be honest. It was very, very dangerous conditions. Very difficult to see, and I was having problems, so I'm afraid it was a bit of a write-off today.
You managed to catch the car a couple of times, though, and get back on track.
Yeah, I spun off and managed to get out of the gravel trap, which was good in one way, but the last one caught me out completely. It's very, very tricky conditions. I mean, I was quick in the warm-up this morning. I thought I had a good wet setup, and but I had troubles keeping up with the people in front of me, and I was always in trouble right from the start.
Are you okay after that last crash?
Yeah, there was no damage there to me, so I'm quite relieved.
And also looking now, with Schumacher ahead and Villeneuve behind, would you like to see that as the result at the end of the day, given the championship position?
I've got to have time to think, I think. You know, today was... everything went so well all weekend, I'm really disappointed.
Damon, thanks for talking to us. Very hard luck.
Thanks very much.
And that is Martin Brundle's Jordan there. I heard that go past the pits with the engine sounding very rough indeed. So that's not an incident from Martin. It's an engine problem, I think, on his Jordan. And we saw him getting out of the car and away into retirement. Not a good weekend for Martin.
And just let's take a deep breath and consider what's happened in this race so far. Pedro Lamy out on the very first lap. David Coulthard is out. Fisichella is out. So that's both the Minardis again. They're having a dreadful season. Olivier Panis, the man who won at Monaco, is out. Eddie Irvine is out. Ukyo Katayama is out. Damon Hill is out. We've just seen Martin Brundle retire. That means to say that there are effectively only 10 cars left in the race out of the 20 who started, and this is only lap 19 out of 65 as you watch Martin Brundle, of whom we had hoped for so much when he joined the Jordan team, sadly walking in for another retirement. And that's Martin Brundle's 5th retirement out of 7 races this year. And Michael Schumacher is now 23 seconds, as near as makes no difference, ahead of Jacques Villeneuve, who continues to stay ahead of Jean Alesi as Michael Schumacher goes through and laps the Ligier of Pedro Diniz, who is in 10th place. So on lap 20, which is under 1/3 race distance, Schumacher has lapped everybody up to Mika Häkkinen, who is in 9th place. Only one McLaren left, only one Ferrari left, only one Williams left. Both the Benettons are still in the race, and hopefully here is confirmation of what I've just told you. Brundle, Hill and Katayama out, and that should leave the caption to tell us about David Coulthard being out of the race, Pedro Lamy being out of the race. There's the confirmation, and Ricardo Rosset as well, the Brazilian. And as I say, there are 10 drivers left now, 10 out, and we have still got some 45 laps to go. It's going to be pretty thin on the ground by the end of the Spanish Grand Prix, with seemingly a virtually certain win for this man, number 1, world champion twice over, Michael Schumacher, Ferrari.
Yes, he won last year, and it really does look on the cards, providing that car keeps going. And reliability has been pretty good from Ferrari this year. But further back, Jos Verstappen is being quite a star once again, reveling in the difficult conditions. He's running 7th in that TWR Arrows. But having said that, he is ahead of Johnny Herbert in 8th place. Mika Häkkinen having a miserable day for McLaren after David Coulthard went out. back there in 9th, and it was Verstappen who ran so well in the Arrows at the Brazilian Grand Prix. And talking to Tom Walkinshaw of the team just this morning, in fact, and he was explaining how their objective is very much to keep the team running efficiently with no great elevation in performance expected this year, because that takes a long lead time, and they're currently working on developing the new car already for 1997. They obviously would like to get hold of the Honda engine because that looks good, and put together their driver lineup. So it's going to be 1997 before we should see any great improvement from the TW Arrows Hart combination.
Michael Schumacher there, last won a race in Japan at Suzuka last year before he was turfed off the track at Adelaide for the last Australian Grand Prix by Jean Alesi, the chap who is in 3rd position at the moment. At that time, of course, Schumacher was in a Benetton and Alesi was in a Ferrari. And Schumacher is probably driving well within his limits as Martin Brundle walks into the garage, and he's still going round 3-4 seconds a lap faster and increasing the gap between himself and the Williams Renault. And I suspect that Jacques Villeneuve is realistically in his mind settling for 2nd place, maybe hoping against hope that Schumacher might make a mistake and go off the course, or have a particularly bad pit stop, which is very unlikely because the Ferrari team are extremely good. Brundle there, and you saw on the pit wall Jean Todt, the Ferrari team manager, with Giorgio Ascanelli, who is Schumacher's engineer, just watching the monitors, sizing up things. They'll be talking to Schumacher on the radio, giving him pit signals by the board. We're on lap 21. There is Villeneuve 2nd, and as you see, the gap is, if anything, increasing between him and Jean Alesi. Only one man is gaining at the present moment. 2, actually. Berger is gaining on his teammate Alesi, and Barrichello, and Johnny Herbert spins the Sauber. Does he go into the wall? Can he keep it running? Does he keep it running? Is that rear wing going to be all right? It doesn't touch the tyres. So the next question is, did he regain the track? We didn't see. There is Villeneuve. And Berger is catching Alesi at the rate of about 0.3 of a second a lap. Berger 4th, Alesi is 3rd.
In fact, the gap from Alesi to Berger has remained pretty constant for the last 4 or 5 laps. It does wax and wane a little. But Schumacher at the front continues to extend it, 31 seconds now. Now, the fastest lap that he set of the race was set some 7 or 8 laps ago, and that was a 1:45. He's slowed up for 1:48. Now, that doesn't mean that he's backing off. I think it's more of a reflection of the fact that the track has actually got a little bit more slippery, and that's because more rain is coming down, because the others behind, Villeneuve, has dropped down from doing 49s to 1:52s as well. So clearly the track very greasy indeed, and it's just so easy to make a mistake in these conditions, and we've seen a lot of drivers go off. We've just latterly had the Ferrari team looking on at their man, proudly I'm sure, quite relaxed, and I suspect Schumacher is virtually as relaxed in his car too. But we saw Johnny Herbert then make that mistake and spin off. Believe me, it is just so easy when you've got 700 horsepower that can be unleashed with just an inadvertent flick of the foot on the accelerator. Just hitting a bump can put enough power suddenly through those back wheels in these very delicate conditions to have those cars spinning like a top and off. And as soon as that happens, the trick is to get on the clutch, get the clutch stick, keep the engine revving, and make sure that you can try and be in a position to drive out of it. And I mean the gravel trap, assuming that you haven't hit anything. And now with the cars with a hand clutch, that's increasingly difficult. And Mika Hakkinen there uses a hand clutch. In fact, David Coulthard uses a foot-operated clutch to give him more control, not just on a start, but also in the event of a spin, if that should happen.
Now, Schumacher is about to lap Mika Hakkinen. He is lapping 5 seconds a lap faster than the McLaren. They certainly have not solved the handling problem. That's the longer wheelbase McLaren that Hakkinen is driving. They introduced a shorter wheelbase version for the twists and turns of Monaco, reverted to the long wheelbase car for this race, and it sadly hasn't done him any good. And Schumacher's just picking his moment, and he finds it there to go past, and the next target for him to lap is Jos Verstappen. I know it's early days to be talking about the World Championship at the present moment, but irrespective of what happens in this race, Damon Hill is still going to have an absolutely massive lead in the championship as we come up to the Canadian Grand Prix, which is the halfway point of the World Championship. But if the first two stay where they are now, with Villeneuve in second place on 6 World Championship points. That would give him 28 points. And Michael Schumacher, who's currently got 16, would have 10 to give him 26. So it would be much, much closer for second place. The first 3 would be the same. But, as I say, it's early days. This is lap 23. It's a 65-lap race. We're not even halfway through it now. Schumacher leads in his own time, 3 seconds slower than his fastest lap, which was on lap 14, and this is lap 23. Villeneuve second, Alesi third, Berger fourth, Barrichello is fifth, and there are the Ferrari mechanics getting ready to change the wheels and tyres of race leader Michael Schumacher's car.
That's going to put a bit of a twist on the race, I think. Only a little one, because Schumacher's advantage is pretty huge at the moment. He will be able to get into this pit and come out again and still retain his lead over Villeneuve. But we are at just over 1/3 distance, so it looks very much as if this stop is going to be the first of 2 for Schumacher, whereas I would have thought, and of course had said, that I think we can expect just 1 stop. Now, I still believe that will be the case for the Williams people and for the Benetton cars of Alesi and Berger, and that would explain to a small extent as to why Schumacher is faster. And it may well have been that they were considering that the track conditions may have dried out, and if other cars do the same, then that would have been the logic, in that the first stop may well have coincided more or less with a change from wet weather tyres onto slicks, as we saw at Monaco. Now, we're going to have to look for how long this pit stop is. It's not impossible for them to put enough fuel into that car. They could do, depending just how big that car is, to get to the end of the race. To do that, it'll need to be a stop of about 12 seconds, 13 seconds maybe. If it's just a stop of 7 or 8 seconds, that's much more in line with doing the first of 2 stops. So that's what we need to look for when he comes in.
And another retirement, sadly. Johnny Herbert, we saw him spin, and he's seemingly out of the race now. Only 9 left. Increasingly good news for somebody sitting in the Guildford area. John Barnard, who with his men at Shalford designed this car, and Michael Schumacher comes off the track into the pit lane at the end of the 23rd lap, and he's 37 seconds ahead of Jacques Villeneuve, and they can practically change the gearbox and the engine and everything else. I'm joking, of course, but what I mean is he's got all the time in the world to have a very gentle and deliberate pit stop. Now, that looked like a splash and dash stop to me. He seemed to take very little fuel on while he changed the wheels and tyres.
Well, I don't know about a splash and dash. I think it was just a conventional first of 2 stops. That was the kind of length we did expect to put in about 70 litres, and that means he'll be back in probably round about lap 47, lap 48 for his second stop, which should be at the same length. Now, the question is, are we going to see Jacques Villeneuve and Alesi and Berger come in for their first stop now, or, which will, in that case, that'll be the first of 2 for them, or are we going to see them hang on for another 6-7 laps before they come in for what will be 1 stop? And, big moment there for Jacques Villeneuve, gathers it together. So the next couple of laps crucial, and if anybody does come in, make sure we look at that length of time of the pit stop. If it's less than 10 seconds, if it's 6, 7, 8, 9, even 9, it's probably it's the first of 2. If it's more like 11 or 12, 13, it'll get them through to the end.
Well, it may be pretty static at the front, with Schumacher leading by a country mile even after his fuel and tyre stop, but it is getting pretty hectic here, because you can see the gap between Jacques Villeneuve in the Williams Renault, who is second, and Jean Alesi in the Benetton, who is third, and Gerhard Berger is 0.2 of a second per lap, inching up on the battle between Villeneuve and Alesi, as in the Ferrari speedboat. Look at the front wheels, look at the rear wheels, almost solid jets of water coming up from underneath the tyres of the Ferrari. You've heard from Damon Hill how appallingly difficult the circumstances are. The fact is that Damon went off 3 times. The fact is that Michael Schumacher has not gone off at all. Crosses the line now and goes into his 26th lap out of 65. And we wait for Villeneuve to come through. They're the Williams team waiting to bring the Canadian in for his tyre change. The gap between Schumacher and Villeneuve before Schumacher came in for his tyre stop was 41 seconds. Villeneuve has still not gone through. As I speak, he does it, and the gap is down to 23 seconds, but that's as a result of Schumacher stopping and not them gaining in terms of extra speed and track expertise. Alesi is still third, he's just 0.8 of a second, but that is changing all the way around the track. And Gerhard Berger will be going through. In fact, he has done so. In fourth position, Barrichello is fifth. Frentzen is sixth. Verstappen is in seventh place. There is about 4 seconds between Verstappen, who is sixth, and seventh, and Frentzen, who is sixth. Still 9 cars running out of the 20 who started, and we're not yet at half distance for the Spanish Grand Prix. Schumacher, like all of them, has got that very high intensity rear light switched on, the object of which is obvious. If anybody's coming up behind him, very unlikely, they need to see that the Ferrari is approaching through that wall of water.
On lap 26, 1/3 distance would have been lap 22 or thereabouts. Now we've got no sign of any action in the pits from Benetton or from Williams, and indeed we saw the Williams mechanics looking very relaxed, watching their man Villeneuve get on with the job. And here he is. Is he about to do something apart from what he should be doing? I hope not. But it's going to be interesting to see when Villeneuve and indeed the Benetton drivers do come into the pits. Mid-distance, if it was a planned one-stop strategy with equal loads of fuel, would be lap 32, lap 33 of the 65-lap race, and that means in just 5 laps' time. But I think perhaps more likely is the fact that both Benetton and Williams have filled their tanks to the brim, and that will take them well past half distance. It will take them perhaps up to lap 40, maybe even lap 45 before they opt to come in. And it makes sense, once the fuel load is coming down, to stay out there and just let it keep coming down. They will have paid the price for it in the early stages, and that may be why Jacques Villeneuve's pace has been relatively slow, and indeed Alesi's and Berger's behind in the early stages, because their cars weighed quite a lot heavier, quite a lot more than the Ferrari of Michael Schumacher, and that may have given them about a 2-second performance deficit over Schumacher's Ferrari. And so as the race goes on, they should get a little bit faster, and they could probably go to lap 40 before they're going to need to come in.
Schumacher continuing to lap some 4 seconds a lap faster than the two who are pursuing him that you're looking at, Villeneuve and Alesi. And as recently as the San Marino Grand Prix, which after all is only 2 Grand Prix ago, it really was looking as though Damon Hill was absolutely going to walk this World Championship. He had at that time won 4 out of the 5, I'll get it right in a minute, 4 out of the 5 races that had been held. But it's been a downturn since then. Retirement in Monaco through no fault of his own when the engine blew as he came out of the tunnel. Retirement here, having spun off twice before the time that he spun off, which took him out of the race. And the World Championship, whilst he's still considerably in the lead, is not looking so sure now, with the Ferrari getting better and better, and with the genius of Michael Schumacher in control of it. And Pedro Diniz, with that distinctive yellow collar around the cockpit of his Ligier, which it indicates whether it's his or his teammate Olivier Panis, goes past in 9th and last position on lap 28. Into another lap, the battle for second place. Now this is fascinating. Both these cars are powered by the Renault V10 engine. Some people have been saying that the performance superiority, there's Damon, the performance superiority of the Renault V10 is being cut back by the Ferrari engine, by the Peugeot V10 engine and others. And of course it was the engine that went with Damon Hill's car coming out of the tunnel, as I said, at Monaco. And underneath the bridge goes the Williams into turn 5 and out of it. Villeneuve, and look back and you see Sean Alesi.
I must say, it was nice to see just a few minutes ago Damon Hill looking on the pit wall, watching on, seeing how his teammate was going. And he was very candid too. This has been a bad race for Damon Hill. He did make mistakes all the way through, finally putting him out, but he was honest about it, and that doesn't often happen. It's good to see that. But he'll know too that he needs to get things back on the rails when we come to the next Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time, because this looks as if Schumacher is going to pick up 10 points when he's going to pick up none. Hill currently has 43, Schumacher 16 in third with Villeneuve on 22. So that's going to put Schumacher up to 26, assuming that he manages to complete the distance.
I was saying when Schumacher came into the pits that it was good news for John Barnard and his men at Shalford, because they're the people who designed that car. The Ferrari is in fact designed and part built. That's the Ferrari going through and taking Häkkinen again, who's going very slowly indeed, because he's now been lapped, and he had already been lapped by Michael Schumacher before the German came in. I was saying the Ferrari is designed and part built in the Guildford area, and the final completion of building the car, of course, is done at Ferrari's traditional home at Maranello, and it's an incredibly international team. The team manager, Jean Todt, is French. Their top driver, Michael Schumacher, is German. Their second driver, Eddie Irvine, comes from Northern Ireland. Gustav Brunner, who is the designer, comes from Austria. Osamu Goto, who designed the engine, is Japanese. William Todt, the aerodynamicist, is Australian. And so it goes. But Ferrari have not hesitated to use other nationalities if they felt that they were better than the people that were available to them in Italy, and the results are certainly showing. It's still a Ferrari, it's still Italian, but it is very much an international effort.
Schumacher streaming away from Mika Häkkinen, pretty humiliating for Häkkinen and McLaren, it has to be said. But in fact, Häkkinen is not going that slowly. It's just that Schumacher is going just so very fast. He's still lapping 4 seconds faster than the majority of the field, who are pretty evenly matched. We've got Villeneuve in second on 1 minute 52, Lacey on 52, Berger on 1 minute 51, Barrichello on 51, Frentzen on 1 minute 50, Verstappen 51, and Häkkinen 151 on his last lap. So really it's just the speed of this man. Now, it could be considered that part of the reason for this, a major part of the reason, is because Schumacher alone has gone for this 2-stop strategy, and the others are running either a 1-stop or, well, they have to run a 1-stop, but even more maybe than 110 litres of fuel that you'd need to stop midway through the race. But that is not enough of a difference in terms of weight and implications on performance to account for these differences in lap time. And I suspect that if Schumacher was running a 1-stop strategy himself, he too would be ahead by probably as much. In fact, he'd be further ahead at this point because he wouldn't have stopped at all, and he'd have to stop like a Lacey, Berger, Villeneuve, Barrichello, round about lap 35, lap 40, lap 45. We really won't know, and we can't know because we don't know how much fuel these cars have on the grid. We can just have a guess at how big we think their fuel tanks are, and the fact that they may well have just filled them up to the brim, and to see how far that takes them. And fuel consumption is better in the wet as well. When you're spending 27% of the lap time on full throttle rather than 60% as you are in the dry, you're going to use up a lot less fuel.
Well, it's close between Villeneuve and Lacey for second position. It's close between these two for sixth, because that is Jos Verstappen, the Dutchman, in the Arrows, and ahead of him, Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the Sauber Ford, as we rejoin this battle for second position, and there's still a second or so between Villeneuve and Lacey as Villeneuve exits the right-hander. He's about to lap somebody. I suspect it's Pedro Diniz, because we've just seen Michael Schumacher go past him, coming out of the gloom towards us. Quite dreadful conditions, and it's a testimony to the ability of the drivers to keep the cars on the track at all, never mind lap at the speeds that they are doing.
So lap 31 out of these 65, and I'm beginning to think that it might be a shrewd move for Benetton to bring Lacey into the pits now, because they can certainly get enough fuel into that car for him to reach the end of the race. Now if they do that, the downside of it will that the car will run in a heavier format for a fair bit of the race, but I just feel that the speed that he could run at, given a clear bit of track, would be enough to justify that. If he pulled off now, he could be back out of the pits and lapping probably 2 seconds faster and get an advantage over Villeneuve when he comes in for his pit stop. Because if they both come in at a similar time and the Villeneuve pit stop is as good as Lacey's, if not better, he's going to come out ahead, and Lacey may well be stuck with following the Williams all the way to the end of this race, when really he should be faster.
1.2 seconds in it between them at the present moment, so a faster stop for the Benetton car of that order could, as Jonathan says, make all the difference. 9 left, Diniz is the last of them, and Schumacher, having made his stop, and neither Villeneuve nor Alesi have, but Schumacher, when he came in, was over 40 seconds ahead of the battle for second position. He's back again, 42 seconds, having made his stop, having taken on a fresh set of tyres, having taken on more fuel, and he has rebuilt that massive lead. I mean, really, nothing can stop him now, except some sort of incident as he's passing another driver, or something going wrong with the car. And the Ferrari V10 engine has been reliable this season. The car itself handles extremely well, although he had a lot of trouble in practicing setting it up the way he wanted it. But the ability of Michael Schumacher is such that he can compensate for that sort of problem. And when the car is absolutely right with these new parts that they're making for it, then I can only say heaven help the rest of them. We're riding with Jos Verstappen now, 7th place, chasing Heinz-Harald Frentzen Sauber. That is it, through the gloom ahead.
And we can see all too well the problem that he's got, because Verstappen is faster than Frentzen, and yet it's so difficult to see the advantage of, or the thing that makes overtaking easier in the wet is the longer braking distances, but the disadvantage is just that you cannot get close enough and have a clear field of vision. We just see it so very well. It's difficult to even see Verstappen in the sprawl of spray behind that Sauber of Frentzen.
Now, the Arrows car, the second of the cars that you will see in your screen in a moment, was actually designed by Alan Jenkins, ex-McLaren engineer, who went to the Arrows team, designed this car, and is now designing the car that the Stewart Grand Prix, Jackie Stewart's team, will be using next year with the Ford V10 engine. And Frank Durney, who is ex-Benetton and ex-Ligier, is now in charge of the Arrows side of things. And he was saying to me today that it's very difficult to take over a car that someone else has designed. You can see there the Benetton mechanics coming out into the pit lane to receive either Alesi or Berger, who are third and fourth. As Jonathan was saying, it would seem to make more sense to us for it to be Alesi, because he's now under a second behind Villeneuve, has clearly got no way of getting past him except trying to do so with a better pit stop. And I was saying that Frank Durney was saying it's very difficult to take over a car that's been designed by someone else. The characteristics are different, and he has found that the Arrows characteristics in the dry yesterday and the wet today were totally unpredictable from his point of view. They've set the car up as best they can for these conditions, and it's enabling Jos Verstappen to hold that 7th place behind the very accomplished Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who, I remind you, is in the spare Sauber, having gone off at some 130 miles an hour backwards into the wall during the warm-up this morning. Alesi comes in, the Benetton people hold out the lollipop. He goes over the earthing strip, which you saw sticking up underneath the car. And of course, Villeneuve has gone through. He's pulling away all the time, but Alesi is stationary in the pits. 11.9 seconds. Now Berger will go through into third position, in fact has already done so, and so has Rubens Barrichello, who is now fourth, and Frentzen, who is fifth. So Alesi came in third, exits sixth, but he has made his stop. Villeneuve has not, Berger has not, Barrichello has not, and Frentzen has not. So there's going to be some interest and possibly some excitement from now on when they come in, when Villeneuve in particular comes in, because it was 0.9 of a second between the Benetton, which you're looking at now, of ex-Ferrari driver Jean Alesi, who was signed for Benetton before Gerhard Berger became available. The Ferrari drivers of 1995 joined Benetton en masse for 96, and there is Ferrari's top man, the world's top man, number one, world champion 1994, world champion 1995, Schumacher, and he's leading now by as near as makes no difference, an amazing 50 seconds on lap 34 out of 65.
And again, just watch Schumacher's lines, compare them to the lines of the other drivers, and you can see just how imaginative he's been in finding a level of grip from this track that the others have not. He's not been prepared to get stuck in a rut. Very easy to do that, it has to be said, when you're trying to wrestle with all the horsepower. There's that's Lacey coming out of the pits there. He's made his pit stop. Oh, and he had a very near moment there. Gathered it all together. Is he going on the gravel trap? No, he's just about eased it back on the track. That won't lose him too much, maybe 3 or 4 seconds. His tyres would have been cold, and one of the ironies of this is that after a pit stop, your tyres actually cool down. In terms of the new tyres being put on, they'll be at 80, 90 degrees as they come out of the blankets, but as soon as you go down that pit lane, they will cool off, and it'll take the first half a lap to get the temperature up, and it was maybe that, together with a bit more fuel, that caught Lacey out. Benetton pit team getting ready for Berger. Now that 11-second stop was the right length of stop for Lacey to take on enough fuel to get to the end of the race. Schumacher there, don't forget, has got one more stop to do, but quite frankly he's so far ahead that he could cruise the stop and still win this race with ease. So we should expect the same 11 seconds from Berger.
And of course that mistake or problem, whatever it was, that caused Lacey to run wide and onto the grass will have overcome any possibility of him passing Villeneuve when the Canadian comes in for his pit stop, unless Villeneuve has a bad stop or, like Lacey, has a problem subsequently. And to be honest, I think that's less likely to happen with Villeneuve than with Lacey. The Canadian is, for his age, and he is 25 years old, an incredibly cool, relaxed, laid-back, unflappable, difficult to impress chap. When he'd won at the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, and everybody was congratulating him on winning only his 4th Grand Prix, he was completely unimpressed in the nicest possible way. He said, well, that's what I'm here for, that's what I'm paid for. And remember too that the next Grand Prix on June the 16th is at Montreal in Canada. More of that in a moment, because here comes Gerhard Berger, who moved up into 4th place behind Rubens Barrichello when Jean Lacey came into the pits. Now Lacey's time was of the order of 11 seconds, and this time no problem. Gerhard Berger has stalled in the pits a couple of times this season, gets out cleanly this time, and that is Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who is in from 5th position in the Sauber. Out he goes.
But so also is in the pits on the left there was Jos Verstappen in the Arrows. So sadly the Arrows team have not managed to use the stop to get ahead of Frentzen, and I suspect we'll see him come out any minute now following the Sauber as that leaves. But a very, very fast stop there from Gerhard Berger. Benetton team really being very, very efficient at getting the fuel in, and this time, as we said, Berger not falling foul of the stalling problems that have afflicted him so often in the past. But that should be Frentzen out now. He's well clear of Jos Verstappen, and should be that give him enough breathing space to maintain that position, reliability allowing, to the end of the race, because it was this stop that really did give Verstappen and the Arrows team the best chance of getting ahead of the Sauber.
Frentzen, there was a buzz in the pit lane after he had his crash that he wouldn't be restarting because he had been shaken up too badly. Because going backwards into the wall at 130 miles an hour tends to slow you up a bit, to put it mildly. But of course he will have been examined by Professor Sid Watkins, who is the governing body's medical consultant, and he will have passed him as clear to take part in the race. You're looking at Martin Brundle shortly as Tony Jardine talks to him.
Martin, absolutely dire conditions, terrible out there. Are you glad to be out of it, or would you prefer still to be in there fighting?
That's an easy one to answer. I'd obviously rather be out on the track. I mean, it is quite tricky because the track's changing every lap, and the less cars there are on the track to clear the water, the more aquaplaning there's going to be. I had a lot of aquaplaning. My car was fine when it dried up a little bit, but it's every lap's a new experience.
You managed to catch it a couple of times and actually get across the gravel traps. How did you manage that?
It happened to me once. Yeah, I touched the brakes and I was still up on top of some water, aquaplaning along, and it's actually stalled the engine, believe it or not. And you can't get it rerunning, and you just carry straight on. It's actually better to go straight on and restart it and carry on. But you know, it's, as I say, you just, the lap before it was fine, then a little bit more water and the car's just up on the top. We need some more tyre pressure in these conditions. It opens the tyre up and gives you better grip in heavy water, but less grip when it dries up.
Is that what finally stopped you, water in the engine?
No, not at all. The gearbox has failed.
And what about visibility? Could you see anything out there?
If you're by yourself, you can see something, but I mean, I had a great start. I was flying through, and I went past an accident, and it was pure luck because I couldn't actually see who was having an accident. I just know I went through the middle of it. I guess it was a couple of McLarens or something.
Martin, hard luck. Thanks very much for talking to us.
Thanks.
Lap 37, you're looking at Jacques Villeneuve in second position, and I can tell you that the Williams mechanics are out in the pit lane, and that is the reason. In comes Villeneuve, who was only 3 seconds ahead of Rubens Barrichello. So the Brazilian goes past me now and moves up into second place in the Spanish Grand Prix. Now, the next question is, will Jean Alesi and Gerhard Berger get past before Jacques Villeneuve exits the pit lane? The quickest stop we've had so far was about 6 or 7 seconds. Out goes Villeneuve in a second less than it took Alesi, but Alesi goes through now, and Alesi goes up ahead of Villeneuve into third position. At the present moment, Schumacher leads, Barrichello is second, Alesi is third. That's Barrichello, the young Brazilian driver, in second place in the Jordan Peugeot, and Jean Alesi is down to fourth position, but it is a false dawn really for Rubens Barrichello, because whilst Schumacher, Villeneuve, Alesi, Berger, Frentzen and Verstappen have all stopped, Rubens Barrichello has not. He can't go very much faster than he is going because of the danger of going off in these very, very slippery conditions. And Villeneuve is going to be going quicker now on new tyres, although they don't make all that much difference in the wet compared with the dry. And he is in fourth position. Michael Schumacher leads on lap 38, 65 lap race. Only 9 of the 20 starters are still running for all sorts of reasons. Johnny Herbert is out, Salo is out, Martin Brundle is out, Damon Hill went out on lap 11 when he spun for the third time. Ukio Katayama is out, Eddie Irvine is out, Fisichella is out, Ricardo Rosset is out, David Coulthard is out, Pedro Lamy is out. Of the Ferraris, only Schumacher's is left. Of the Jordans, only Barrichello's is left. Of the Williams, only Villeneuve is left. But both the Benettons are in the top 6. And only one Sauber is left, that of Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Only one Arrows is left. And only one McLaren is left. And David Coulthard, of course, was the man who's missing in the McLaren, and Tony Jardine is with him.
David Coulthard, not the result you wanted. What happened?
Well, I still don't really know, to be honest. I couldn't see, obviously I've hit the back of someone, could have lost the front left corner of the car, but I couldn't see anything, so I don't know who it was.
Conditions are dire, they're getting worse by the second. You happy to be out of it, or you'd still like to be in there?
Well, of course, having bad qualifying, this was the ideal conditions for us to try and score a point because so many cars go off. But really, I'm glad to be here because the conditions when you're in the midfield, the visibility, you can't see anything, and it really is quite dangerous. So very difficult for the drivers out there.
Too dangerous to race today or not?
Well, that's you know, obviously that's the decision of the safety delegate to decide. But certainly very, very difficult for the drivers to see the other cars in front, and you know, with this constant rain, it has to be questionable.
Damon's happy to be out of it at the moment. We've just spoken to Martin Brundle. He said it was almost impossible for visibility.
Well, that's right. When you're behind the other cars, you just can't see anything but a blanket of spray. And you really, the cameras to the cars, you know, the visibility that you see at home, it just doesn't give justice to how difficult it is for the drivers. And the only place to be is in the lead, but there only can be one guy in the lead. So it's terrible. It really is very difficult to race in these conditions.
Looking forward to a dry Canada?
I hope it will be dry there, but yeah, I'm just looking forward to putting this whole weekend behind me and trying to qualify and run in the points in Canada.
Thanks, David.
Thanks very much.
Well, it hasn't been a good day for the British drivers, but Rubens Barrichello is currently in second place, but he's the only one of the drivers, apart from Hakkinen and Diniz, who are well back to not have stopped. We saw the Jordan crew about to get ready. Now, the thing is, can Barrichello get out ahead of Alesi? Can he get out ahead of Villeneuve? He was He was back there in 5th position behind Berger, and I'm sure he can make up something. That's the Ligier team getting ready for Diniz, so we're going to have quite a bit of action in the pits. But some good action out on the track occurred, as we suspected, when Alesi and Villeneuve both made their pit stops. In fact, the stop from Alesi was a little bit longer. If we take the whole length of the pit lane, he took 32.7 seconds, whereas Villeneuve took 31.2. So over a second was saved by Villeneuve's driving and the Williams team's pit stop and the amount of fuel that went in. But what mattered was what happened out on the track on those intervening laps, and it was that enabled Alesi to spike that off as he left the pits from his own stop to move ahead of Villeneuve, the pit stop allowing that change of position. So the next bit of action is we're watching out for that Barrichello stop. We know it's going to be probably around about 7 or 8 seconds. He's stopping later. We know the Jordan can take a lot of fuel, so it will be a little bit shorter, or it should be if it's a slick pit stop. We need to look very carefully. Will he be getting out ahead of Berger? I think that's quite a possibility, a probability. Well, he'll be very close to a Villeneuve, I'm sure, but I suspect he will not be out early enough to get ahead of Alesi.
And meantime, Michael Schumacher, the second of these two cars, is coming up to lap Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who is in the points. Schumacher is now 70 seconds ahead of Rubens Barrichello, and the Jordan team will be praying that the little Brazilian finishes as Pedro Diniz comes in and the Jordan people move out of the way. I was going to say that the Jordan team would be hoping that Pedro Diniz gets out before their man comes in, because they were right in front of his entry line, and that's exactly what's happened. Pedro Diniz, in 9th position, already a lap down, has made his pit stop. It's just Mika Hakkinen and Rubens Barrichello now, of the 9 who are left running, out of the 20 who started, to come in, and the Jordan team once more break ranks and go back into the garage. I was saying that they'll be praying that Rubens Barrichello finishes, because the 1996 Gary Anderson design car is an excellent racing car. The Peugeot technicians in France have done an enormous amount to overcome the reliability problems they have been having with their V10 engine in the past. They've done that, and it's now possibly the most powerful racing engine in Formula One. For instance, Martin Brundle at Monaco was the fastest in all the 3 individual lap sectors, and Barrichello has been going extremely well in racing this year. All he's got to do is get a finish, because the highest that the Jordan team have had so far this year is a couple of 4th places for Barrichello. Well, enough of that. Here is the 3rd placed man, Jean Alesi, biding his time, pressing on as much as he can, waiting to see what happens when Barrichello comes in, and he's now lapping 3 seconds a lap faster than the Brazilian. The race order on lap 41 out of 65, and the gaps are Schumacher 70 seconds ahead of Barrichello, who is 19 seconds ahead of the man you're looking at, Jean Alesi, who is 7 seconds ahead of 4th placed Jacques Villeneuve, who is 4.5 seconds ahead of 5th place Gerhard Berger. Looking good for the Constructors' Championship for Benetton. Both their cars in the top 5, Alesi 3rd and Berger 5th. And Berger is 5 seconds ahead of Heinz-Harald Frentzen. The Saubers are again in the points. Monaco was the first race this year where the Swiss team with its Ford engine scored points, and both Herbert and Frentzen scored points, 3rd and 4th.
Well, Barrichello is about to come into the pits. His car will therefore be very light with a very low fuel load, but he's really making good use of it. He's set the second fastest race lap now, 1 minute 47.7, really pushing hard. Alesi is 1 minute 49.3. But importantly, Villeneuve is 1 minute 50, Berger 1 minute 51. So that means Barrichello is lapping 3-4 seconds faster than those two at the moment, and that's going to augur well for his chances of coming out and moving up from the 5th position that he was holding before this round of mid-race pit stops. And it's my suspicion he's going to end up in 3rd place behind Alesi. There's the crew already. That looks like Ferrari getting ready for Schumacher's second stop. That's all going to be happening about the same time, but again, Schumacher is 1 minute ahead of Barrichello, who's second at the moment, and that's going to mean that he can get out well ahead of Barrichello, ahead of everybody else. It's going to be very much a routine, very deliberate pit stop from Ferrari. The important thing is that nothing is fumbled, because they can afford to make it twice as long as it should be and still come out comfortably in the lead.
20 laps on, almost, from Schumacher's first stop. He came in on lap 23. He's now on his 42nd lap with the Ferrari people out there, with the rain still coming down. You can see how appallingly wet. Look at the leading edge of the Jordan rear wheel and the water that's building up. It's so very easy to aquaplane in these conditions, because you are literally at some points of the track riding on a cushion of water with virtually no grip between your tyre and the tarmac, and that's why those grooves are in the tyres, to clear out, to make channels. And Schumacher into the pit lane. Here he is, Michael Schumacher, coming in the lead in the Ferrari, 67 seconds ahead. He stopped on lap 23. He's now stopping at the end of lap 42. And as Jonathan said, there's all the time in the world for the Ferrari people to take their time. He took 11 seconds on the first stop. He boils out of the pits, throwing up water behind him in 8.8 seconds from his second stop. And of course, with a 67-second lead, is going to rejoin in the lead after his second stop, as he did after his first stop, by a reduced margin, but still a colossal margin. So there's 23 laps now for Michael Schumacher. 23 3-mile laps, 2.9 to be absolutely exact, between him and the first checkered flag for Ferrari as winners since Canada last year. It would be his first victory, but you can never start talking too soon about that sort of thing. You mustn't start talking too soon about that sort of thing in Grand Prix racing, because there's many a slip twixt cup and lip, and 23 laps is still quite a while for even Michael Schumacher. Barrichello coming in from second position. Now this is the question, can he hold second position? I rather doubt it, because he's only 23 seconds ahead of Alesi. And Alesi has gone through now and moved up into second position. Now what about Jacques Villeneuve? Will he go through? Yes! Villeneuve just goes past me as Barrichello exits the pit lane now. There is the Williams, and he's moving up into third position. So Rubens Barrichello has moved down, and there's Villeneuve, and Barrichello vainly tries to keep the Williams with terrific momentum, of course, because it's on a flying lap, whereas Barrichello is on a standing start lap behind him, fails to do so, goes down from second position to fourth position, with Jean Alesi up into second place, Villeneuve up into third position, and the Frenchman Jean Alesi in the Benetton Renault has at last succeeded in getting past Villeneuve and staying ahead of him, and is in second place, but a massive distance in terms of time and track behind race leader Michael Schumacher.
Well, that was really good assertive driving from Villeneuve there. He saw Barrichello coming out of the pit lane. He would have known what that had meant. That was absolutely crucial for either of those drivers to get in front of the other. To be honest, the odds were stacked against Barrichello. He was the one on a new heavier fuel load as Mika Hakkinen comes in for his fuel stop. Now he's practically so far back behind Verstappen, 42 seconds indeed, that the stop is not going to make a big difference to their fortunes in this race, but it's a good one as ever. McLaren do make good pit stops, but Villeneuve drove round the outside, down around that first turn of Barrichello, and that's not easy, and it's so easy to make a mistake. He hasn't done it now, and that should mean that Villeneuve can probably hold that position for the remaining 22 laps of this race, and if he can come home third behind the Alesi, that'll be a very good result for the Canadian. He didn't finish the last time it was wet, and he actually has a slightly harder time in the wet, because as he wears contact lenses, he has to keep the visor firmly sealed down to prevent any bits of grit going into his visor, into his face area, and that means that he's prone to have more misting problems than the others. So just let's hope he can keep it going, not making any further mistakes, to keep that third place for the end of the race.
And I was saying earlier on that the next Grand Prix at Canada in Montreal is on June the 16th. And although Jacques Villeneuve does not compare himself with, or even say he's racing for, his late great father, Gilles Villeneuve, he, and I'm sure the whole of Canada, who I know are listening to us now and watching this race, will be very conscious of the fact that the great Gilles Villeneuve for Ferrari won his first Grand Prix at Montreal. Well, that's not going to happen to Jacques Villeneuve because he's already won his first Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, race 4 out of 16. But he will be going back to Canada very much, and justifiably so, as the conquering hero, and the whole of Canada will be hoping that he can do on the circuit in the middle of the St. Lawrence Seaway what his father did so many years ago for Ferrari. Win. It would be a wonderful thing, and we would hear the "O Canada" national anthem again as we heard at the Nürburgring. But it looks as though we're going to hear the German national anthem again here sometime since we did, because Schumacher has got this race absolutely in his pocket. He's not a man who makes mistakes. This is his 76th Grand Prix with a quite amazing record of success behind him. He's already won 19 races, and you can go on with the statistics. The fact is that he has been on the podium, the first 3 places, 39 times out of the 75 races that he's competed in. So more than 50% of Michael Schumacher's races since he made his astounding debut to Grand Prix racing in 1991 for Eddie Jordan's team have seen him finish in the top 3 places. And if he wins here today, it'll be no more than he deserves, because he and Ferrari have been developing this car race by race. Eddie Irvine, his teammate, said rather wistfully about Michael Schumacher in Monaco, Schumacher has got a serious relaxation problem. He doesn't know how to do it. And that is because Schumacher is like the late, great Ayrton Senna. He applies himself 110% to every aspect of anything that a Formula One driver has to do, to know about and to command. And he does it consummately well, as you can see for yourself. Lap 46, and he is 64 seconds ahead of Jean Alesi.
So with 20 laps to go, let's just recap on the position here, because there are no more fuel stops, certainly not scheduled for anybody. Do you know, there are really 2 races going on here. We've got Michael Schumacher, who is with his 63-second lead, so far out in front that nothing's going to come near him. He's been in a complete class of his own. But behind that, we've got Jean Alesi in the Benetton, just 10.6 seconds ahead of Jacques Villeneuve. Villeneuve is 7.9 ahead of Rubens Barrichello in 4th place. 9.7 behind Barrichello is Berger in 5th. Just 4.2 seconds back to Frentzen, and 2.3 seconds behind Frentzen is Jos Verstappen in 7th. So very close behind Alesi. And interestingly, Verstappen has made a very good recovery from what was clearly a poor pit stop from the TWR Arrows team. That stop was 6 seconds longer than the stop of Frentzen, so something went wrong. We didn't see it, so we don't know what it was. But Verstappen has recovered from that, and he's now right up behind Frentzen. But again, getting by is a very different thing. But I find it hard to believe that we're not going to see Verstappen have a go at Frentzen, or indeed Frentzen at Berger, and potentially Barrichello at Villeneuve in the last 20 laps of the race. It's going to become more tempting, and if the rain can even start to abate, and I must say there's no sign of that at the moment, and visibility improve a bit, that is when we're likely to see more fuel stops. And Rubens Barrichello is coming in again. This looks like a problem for Barrichello. Yes, his lap times have come in. We're not looking at it, but I can tell you that Barrichello is into the pits. He came in fairly slowly, and there's no scheduled reason for that. I think he will have a problem.
Well, there he is. Brundle already out of the race. You can see the rear wheel spinning up on the jack, and
we've also got Gerhard Berger, who's dropped right back. I just wonder if they've had any kind of coming together. I would have thought so. They should have been too far away for that. Maybe it's the transmission, a gearbox problem, is it? He takes a gear, he stalls the engine. This really does look a bit like it. When they jacked the car up, the rear wheels of that Jordan were turning. Gearboxes are very complex on these cars. 7-speed and fingertip operated clutch on the Jordan, fingertip operated gear change, all controlled by electronics, and something has got the better of it. Barrichello is climbing out of the car. This is a very, very sad end to a great drive from Barrichello. His prowess in the wet has been demonstrated many times before. It was in Brazil until he had a spin off and put him out of the race. It was 3 years ago at Donington when he was running third sensationally in the Jordan until he had a problem. Cruel luck for Barrichello, who really is a very sensitive driver, a very gifted driver, and in the wet those kind of talents really do come to the fore, and he deserves more than this end to the result, and as do the Jordan team, because the car has gone well, they prepared it well. The wet setups that Martin Brundle told us about were clearly working well for Rubens Barrichello. Huge disappointment.
Yes, a thoroughly downcast. That's Gary Anderson, the car's designer, on the left. Andrew Green, who is the transmission man in particular. And you look now at Jacques Villeneuve, who is in third place. And Gerhard Berger is not with us. We're going to be lucky if we get 6 cars finishing this race. But meantime, Johnny Herbert is on his second generation of pit lane, or rather garage interviewers. He had umpteen interviews with Jonathan Palmer when Jonathan was down there, meeting and greeting Johnny Herbert when he came in, having retired from a race. Now he's with Tony Jardine, who's finding out what's happened to him.
Johnny Herbert, very hard luck, very, very bad conditions today. Your car was great all weekend. What happened finally?
Well, on 2 spins in the race, it was a bit of a shame. I aquaplaned down the short straight out of the back of the circuit on the first one, and when you aquaplane, there's not a lot you can do about it. And the second one, again, because of the conditions when they started drying out, the car was okay, but when it got wet, then I was really struggling with aquaplaning down all the straights, and then just coming out the first corner, there's a little bit of a river going across, and I hit that, and it jumped away again.
Johnny, was it a case maybe of using the monsoon tyres instead of the rain tyres, a case for monsoon tyres?
It was possible. It was just always trying to think, well, if a load of cars are running, normally the circuit, even if it rains hard, will clear up. Like now, we've only got about 7 cars left, so the circuit has time to water over. So it was a thought, but then we didn't think that it probably was the right conditions, and I think the way the circuit did go for a short space of time, they would have gone really badly off, because then it dried quite a lot, so it would have been wrong really to use them. Now, sure, it's probably right to use them now, but the problem is what the weather does.
A case of remembering where the rivers were.
Well, that was one of the problems. And again, when it first started, it was sort of quite wet, but then it got better, and then it's got really bad since then, and then the rivers are just getting bigger all the time. It's just making it a bit difficult.
So, a chance to dry out now and think about Canada.
Yes, very possible, yeah.
Thanks for talking to us, Johnny, and hard luck.
Okay.
Well, Michael Schumacher leading on the 49th lap out of 65. And now with the disappearance of Gerhard Berger, there are 8 left. And Lacey is 66 seconds behind Schumacher. He's about 10 seconds ahead of Jacques Villeneuve, who's in 3rd position. Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the Sauber is 4th. Jos Verstappen in the Arrows is up into 5th position, and that's looking good. They've had just 1 World Championship point this year from 6th place in Argentina for the Dutchman. Mika Hakkinen is in the points at 6th place for McLaren, notwithstanding the fact that he's already been lapped. Pedro Diniz is 7th for Ligier, a lap down. Barrichello is out, Berger is out, and all the others that I've told you about. Now, I thought that Monaco was surprising enough. Just 3 out of 22 that started there, finishing the race. We've only got 7 left here now, and we're on lap 49 out of 65. Nothing would surprise me. And there's the proof, because out goes Jos Verstappen. Spins out and stalls the engine onto the grass in the Arrows. Now there are 6. So everybody who is left in the race is in the points. Schumacher, Alesi, Villeneuve, Frentzen, Hakkinen moves up into 5th. And wonder of wonders, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, Pedro Diniz, who's never looked like scoring a World Championship point in his life, with first of all 40 and now Ligier, is doing just that. That's a replay of Verstappen spinning out, and Pedro Diniz from Brazil is up into 6th position.
That looked a slightly strange offer for Verstappen to have there, and you can see the padding on the back of his helmet to prevent the pounding against the backrest from the acceleration of these cars, because he was actually powering out of the corner, whereas most of the spins we've seen have come from coming into the corner too quickly, locking up the rear wheels, particularly under down changing through the gearbox under braking. So curious one. frustration, enormous frustration for Verstappen, but also the Arrows team, because Verstappen is exceedingly quick. He's very talented, but the last few Grand Prix he's made too many mistakes. I'm sure it will come right. He's a very gifted driver, but he's had many offs. He went off at Monaco, although I think that was involved with a tangle with one of the Minolis on the first lap. But he's been off at other Grand Prix too, and a great shame. They're going to be very mixed feelings in the Arrows camp, I think. Very grateful, very much appreciative of the skill that he brings behind the wheel, but frustrated by the amount of time that he actually has gone off this year. But Diniz, interestingly, hasn't, and he's had a fair bit of stick this year for his lack of pace, and there's no doubt that he is what we call a renter driver. He's in Formula One not because of his skill, but because, or not just because of his skill, to be fair, but because he can bring some money too. Now we're with Verstappen. Look, he puts on the opposite lock, he puts the power on, the Arrows breaks away very quickly. I don't know whether it actually hit something. We might see the jolt. We don't see it long enough to make a judgment, but clearly the engine was stalled. It didn't look as if the car was damaged, and that prevented Verstappen from driving away, even if he found the grip. But so far this year, there are only 2 drivers who've not actually spun or crashed out of a race, and that is Gerhard Berger, and with all the experience Berger's got, that's no great surprise. The other will promote some surprise, because it's Pedro Diniz. He's never yet spun or crashed out of a race, and that's quite an attribute, quite a credit to Diniz for that, because he's driven in some very treacherous conditions. No Grand Prix season has been as wet as this one, and if he can keep it going on this race, he's going to score a very well-deserved point.
If I write in, if I say, as I'm about to say, that there is no precedent for the situation of 3 drivers finishing in 1 Grand Prix and 6 or less, because we've got a long way to go finishing in the next one, 354 people will write in and tell me I'm wrong, but the fact remains that Monaco with 3 and here with 6 is, to put it mildly, very unusual. Well, we've heard from Tony Jardine with David Coulthard and with Martin Brundle. Now he's in the Jordan pit with Barry Keller, I think.
Quite amazing down here. I just happened to come into the Jordan garage to try and find out what happened to Rubens Barrichello. The car was in here, the mechanics were all over the place. Gary Anderson, the chief designer, was in charge. They obviously had some transmission problems. They were going through the gears. They fixed it. Rubens was changed out of his overalls. He's back into his fireproof suit now. He's just put his helmet on. They're going to go back out on the track, and obviously they could get some World Championship points.
Excellent thinking, because the way cars have dropped out and may still drop out of this race means that anyone who's running at the end of it is more than likely to be in the points. Michael Schumacher is a steady 63 seconds ahead of Alesi now. The Frenchman's last lap was quicker and considerably quicker than Schumacher's, but Schumacher, as he goes through to complete another lap, and that takes him into his 52nd lap, just 13 left, including the one he's on, can really take things very easily indeed. What he has to do is to make sure that he does not lose concentration. It reminds me of the time when Ayrton Senna was leading the Monaco Grand Prix by a long, long way. Did just that. He lost concentration, crashed at the entrance to the tunnel, out of the race, and disconsolately went back to his apartment. I cannot see Michael Schumacher doing that.
But Gerhard Berger did, because Gerhard Berger dropped back from the 4th place that he was running and back to 8th place, and that came from a loss of concentration from him. Berger spun, which also means that my previously uttered statistic of saying that it was just Diniz and Berger who'd not spun out of a race doesn't actually stand, because although probably it does in terms... No, there he is, Gerhard Berger talking to the team. That's Gerhard Berger out of the Grand Prix, and so it means that the only person that's not spun or crashed out of a Grand Prix is Pedro Diniz. Let's just hope he can keep that record to the end of this race and not just now.
Lap 52, 65 lap race order, as you look at Jean Todt, the Ferrari boss, hoping to see his dream come true of a Ferrari victory of the team that he has led, and he has led it and brought it together magnificently in the last couple of years or so. Schumacher leading by 62 points. Jean Alesi for Benetton is second. Villeneuve is third, 6.5 seconds behind the Benetton. Frentzen is fourth, 37 seconds behind Villeneuve. Hakkinen is fifth. Diniz is in 6th position. Only 6 cars are left out of the 20 that started. And Barrichello now makes it 7 because he has rejoined, albeit 5 or 6 laps behind, but still with a chance of being in the points because he's in 7th position. And if Deniz, Hakkinen, Frentzen, Villeneuve, Alesi or Schumacher drop out of this race, Rubens will be picking up another point for the Jordan team. Michael Schumacher just reeling away the laps, lapping steadily in about 1 minute 52 seconds compared with his own fastest lap of the race as early as lap 14, 7 seconds faster. Well, we're popping down to the pits. There's plenty going on down there. Tony Jardine's with Eddie Jordan now.
Eddie, amazing scenes in here. It was all glum at one moment, now smiles again. You've managed to get the driver back on the track. What actually happened? What was wrong?
Well, really what happened was when the driver rang in to say that the clutch is gone, and sadly it now has finally gone, but the situation was that we thought we could fix it in a short time between the hydraulics and some electrical problem, but obviously, sadly, we're looking at the scene now that that's not possible. But it was worth a try. Rubens had already changed because he wanted to get out of his wet clothes, but that's racing, I suppose. You have to keep trying.
A bold effort. Thanks for talking to us, Eddie.
Thank you.
So, Rubens Barrichello now irretrievably out of the Spanish Grand Prix, having manfully got back into his wet overalls, back into the Jordan, and I imagine it's the same problem there as he had before. So we're back from 7 to 6, we're on lap 53 now, and you look at Jacques Villeneuve, who's on his way to seemingly scoring 6 World Championship points to lift his score to 28 compared with Damon Hill's 43 points. And Michael Schumacher, I say again, if he wins this race, will be on 26 World Championship points, 2 behind Villeneuve, getting closer and closer to the Canadian, and of course getting closer to Damon. He will have closed the gap by 10 points if he wins this race, with Damon Hill's retirement so long ago. This is lap 54. And the retirements feature those of Jos Verstappen, Rubens Barrichello, Gerhard Berger, Johnny Herbert, Martin Brundle, Mika Salo, Damon Hill, Ukyo Katayama, Eddie Irvine, Olivier Parnis, Giancarlo Fisichella, David Coulthard, Pedro Lamy, Ricardo Rosset, and Uncle Tom Cobley and all. There's very few left now, and they're all scoring World Championship points. And no one will be hoping he's going to finish more than Pedro Deniz, because your World Championship first point is always the sweetest.
Now, of those who are running, it's actually Jacques Villeneuve who's running fastest. He's just set his personal fastest lap of the race, so 1 minute 49.0. There he is, and that's in pursuit of Jean Alesi just 3 laps ago. 4 laps ago, Alesi was 8.6 seconds ahead. He's now just 4.4 seconds ahead of Villeneuve. So Villeneuve catching, he's certainly at this rate going to get right up on Alesi's tail by the end. Now we have to wonder, is this because Alesi was just in a bit of a cruise mode and running along without pushing it to the very limit, or does he have a problem? We shall only find out when we see how well Alesi can respond to the closing Villeneuve. We saw that it was 4.9 seconds gap. The previous lap it's 4.0 at that particular point, so that means that Villeneuve is still closing and putting on more pressure. We watch over the next few laps. I don't think Alesi's going to want to see that gap come to any less than 2 or 3 seconds, and so if that's the case, then Villeneuve is certainly learning more about the track. He's still very inexperienced. It's his first full year of Formula 1, his first year of Formula 1, of course, whereas Alesi first started in 1989, so this is his 7th season now. Alesi following up behind McLaren. He's going to come up behind the McLaren, of course, of Mika Hakkinen. He's going to be about to lap that, and that's going to be the kind of hiccup too that could help provide Villeneuve with the opportunity. That is Schumacher, and are we looking at him because anything's about to happen? A big slide there. That is where Damon Hill lost it. That's where Heinz-Harald Frentzen went off on this morning's practice session. Very easy to lose control completely, but Schumacher's car control is extraordinary, but one does wonder quite why he was pushing that hard when he's just got in 10 laps to go of this race, and that could very easily have been a mistake. And let's recognise that he's not past making mistakes. He made one at Monaco going out on the very first lap.
And the gap between Villeneuve and Alesi is coming down at the rate of a second a lap. There is the Frenchman in second place in the Benetton Renault, and Villeneuve is just 3.4 seconds behind him. having lapped a second exactly faster than the Benetton Renault ahead. Lap 55, 65 lap race. There is Alesi second, and there's a replay of Michael Schumacher getting out of shape. Oh, you've got to have razor-sharp reflexes to recover the situation that Schumacher was in there. And Alesi, I think, has got the message, because he just had the back of the Benetton step out a bit there. He knows that Jacques Villeneuve is up there behind him. He's coming up to catch Mika Häkkinen now and lap him. Häkkinen in the McLaren Mercedes is there, the red and white car ahead in 5th position. And on this 56th lap, it's Schumacher way out on his own. This battle, for there is Villeneuve in 3rd position, vying for 2nd. Flavio Briatore on the left, the boss of Benetton. Frank Williams himself on the right. And Alesi is being caught at the rate of 1 second a lap, so that means to say that in 3 laps' time, on lap 58, if Villeneuve can keep it up, he's going to be right up behind the Frenchman. But then getting past the Benetton is going to be extraordinarily difficult, because Jean Alesi is going to make that quite legally and justifiably the widest motor car on the track, by just marginally adjusting his line on corners and down the straight, making sure he comes out at the right sort of angle to make it very difficult for Villeneuve to get past. 3.4 seconds was the gap. 3.0 seconds is the gap as you watch Mika Häkkinen, 5th place, and he is lapping about 9/10 of a second slower than Schumacher. But Schumacher is way off his fastest pace. We ride, listen to the Mercedes engine.
Häkkinen is right off the power. We could have listened again then, but they have to literally caress the throttle very gently. No traction control systems allowed on these cars these days. No anti-lock brakes, no computer suspension. It's all done by the driver's brain and his foot, and getting the balance right is very difficult. These guys have been now racing for a long time in this race. It's been 1 hour and 45 minutes. It's going to run not quite to the 2 hours. This race should finish, and it will finish on the 65th lap and not after 2 hours. And another big slide from Michael Schumacher. You know, he's either got a huge amount of confidence in that car and his ability to control it, or he's just being a tiny bit reckless, and he still maintains a lead, a substantial lead over Alesi of 57 seconds, and he could take it very easy. Rubens Barrichello walking back. Well, he's done the best job he possibly could here today. He's done nothing wrong, apart from maybe be a little bit too eager to jump out of that Jordan when it had the first problem, but clearly that wouldn't have made any difference as it turned out. The car's problems were terminal, and it's all too easy to do that. One is so disappointed after that kind of event when you've driven so well. The car has a problem. Transmission problems have afflicted the Jordan cars from time to time, and understandable. Schumacher continues to pile it on. And it has to be said that that also just shows how difficult the conditions are once again, that even when you're trying to be careful, it's still easy to have the back end of the car flick out, and without backing off so much that your lap times will fall by 5 seconds, it's just very easy to transcend that level of grip from time to time, and that's why it's so important to have the reflexes to cope with it.
Lap 57, Jean Alesi has got the message. He is lapping at the same speed as, or even marginally quicker than, Jacques Villeneuve now. The gap is gone up from 3 seconds to 3.2 seconds on this, the 57th lap, and only 3 cars and drivers are on the same lap, and they are Schumacher, Alesi and Villeneuve. And the Benetton in 2nd place, the Williams in 3rd position, are some 56 to 60 seconds behind the car and driver that you're looking at, the supreme Michael Schumacher, who's driving in this race. I frankly cannot find words good enough to praise. He fought his way up from 5th, having dropped back there from 3rd on the grid, then passed people until he took the lead, and he has never looked back. He's had 2 pit stops. He came in at the end of the 23rd lap for his first pit stop rejoined, still over 20 seconds in the lead, came in at the end of the 42nd lap for an 8.8 second stop, rejoined again well in the lead, rapidly built the gap to over 40 seconds, continued to lap quicker than everybody else on the track, is now 57 seconds ahead of Jean Alesi and growing, and he's on his 58th lap now. If anything happened to stop Michael Schumacher and Ferrari winning this race, the first for the Italian team since Canada last year, there really would be no justice. They richly deserve it.
The rain is coming down harder than ever. We can see the results with the sodden track there, and just look at the amount of spray pouring off the tyres of Schumacher's car. Lap times are 4 seconds slower than they were when the rain was at its least, and he's still fishtailing around with the car. Very, very delicate throttle control here, and as the drivers are going around, the concentration has to be absolutely immaculate, and he still keeps doing it. I think he's enjoying it. I think literally Schumacher and Ferrari have made in recent years cars that are relatively easy. We shouldn't say that. They are less difficult to control when they're sliding around. Alesi and Berger reveled in with that situation last year, and maybe now it's Schumacher's turn of doing that. Ferrari does seem to be quite user-friendly on the limit for a Grand Prix car in these situations, because certainly Schumacher, although the car slid around, has shown no signs of actually coming near to spinning it.
Well, I think I may have spoken a bit too soon about Alesi and Villeneuve, because Villeneuve is cramming on the pressure, and he is catching Alesi. Now, this is the order on lap 59 as you watch the Canadian. Schumacher leading, Alesi second, Villeneuve that you're looking at third. The gap at the end of the previous lap was down to 2.7 lap. Now, there was Alesi, here is Villeneuve. Fourth is Frentzen, who has been lapped in the Sauber in the points for the second race in succession. Fifth is Hakkinen for McLaren. Now, there is Alesi, there is Villeneuve. 3.4 seconds was the gap, then it was 2.7 seconds, now it's 2.4 seconds. So if Villeneuve can keep this up, it's going to be mighty close at the end. But as I said earlier on, I can't see Alesi not being aware of the situation, because there's the thing called radio, and it's coming through his helmet and telling him that Jacques Villeneuve is getting closer and closer, and he'll be seeing the pit board. He's coming up to lap Mika Hakkinen. Hakkinen will need to move over as soon as he sees the Benetton Renault appearing in his mirrors, or Villeneuve will get even closer to Jacques Villeneuve on lap 59 out of 65. And the Ferrari mechanics continue to watch the monitor. Is this going to be their win? Across the line again, 59 completed, into lap 60 goes Michael Schumacher. There is Alesi, there is Villeneuve, out of turn 8, up to turn 9, the right-hander, and on.
And you've got in temperament two very different drivers with Villeneuve and Alesi. Villeneuve is very, very cool indeed. He's let the whole Formula One scene come upon him without being faced by. He's pointing. Alesi was pointing to something there. Now, what was that? Villeneuve getting closer. We understand that Schumacher has a cracked exhaust. We haven't heard an onboard, or certainly I haven't heard an onboard sound from that Ferrari to have a clear idea of that, but it's not slowing him down very much, and indeed it shouldn't. It'll just make the car sound rather sick. But whereas Villeneuve is cool, calm and collected, Alesi can get hot-headed. He certainly can get hot-headed out of the car when things don't go right, and we've seen that he can get hot-headed in the car too. And it's going to have to be the control of that, the balance between these two temperaments that may well come to the fore in the final five laps now of this race.
1.6 seconds, 1.6 seconds, that's all it is. From 2.4 down to 1.6, 0.8 of a second in one lap has been gained by Jacques Villeneuve, and Alesi has still got to get past Mika Hakkinen. This could be the deciding point of this battle for second position on lap 60. Jean Todt, top man. Ascanelli in the middle. Schumacher's engineer. And that is Jacques Villeneuve. Now, it's Williams Renault against Benetton Renault. And this will, of course, bring Jacques Villeneuve 2 points closer to Damon Hill in the World Championship if he can get past Jean Alesi, as the Benetton comes down to Mika Hakkinen in the McLaren.
for a little wipe there from the finger of Jacques Villeneuve. That would be to clear his visor. It's not just the problem with the visors misting up that obscures vision in these cars, because amongst all that water there is also dirt, there's mud, you can see on the edge of the circuit, and so the visors tend to get covered in dirt progressively, and every 5 laps or so you need to wipe that off. And indeed, some drivers used to keep a rag tucked inside the seat, or even the back of their glove with a bit of rag on, just to use that as a surface to keep wiping it. Mika Hakkinen keeps tight. Lacey laps Hakkinen. Quite an indignity there for Hakkinen. He was third on the grid 2 years ago in his car, and he's found it very, very difficult driving in these conditions with the car balancing consistent, not enough grip. Now, we haven't seen Villeneuve come by yet. No doubt he's going to do it any minute now. Lacey joins the main straight. That was where Schumacher had that big slide. Lacey has actually been quite constrained. Now, maybe that was a wipe that we saw, and I wondered what Lacey's finger was doing over the visor. That was probably a wipe to keep his visor clear. Villeneuve now 2 seconds behind Lacey. That was a little bit of a margin that's arisen due to Hakkinen being in between them. I'll be surprised if Villeneuve manages to find a way past Lacey. Lacey is renowned as a man who's difficult to pass. He's a fighter, a real racer. And it's going to be important for the points tally for Villeneuve to finish this Grand Prix. And I think that he's not going to take any chances. But 2 seconds behind is probably about as close as he's going to get, maybe a second, without losing visibility. And you can't run as close in the wet as you can in the dry for that very reason. Although normally in the dry, it's just purely the upset of one's aerodynamics that limits how close you can get. When you get very close to the car in front, the turbulent airflow coming off it disrupts the airflow onto your car, and that means that you lose front downforce. The front of the car runs wide. Here, it's just not being able to see enough, and you need to see to have a chance to spot any little rivers running across the track. Those, as Johnny Herbert said, are the real hazard areas, because a river will make the car aquaplane. And when we heard from Johnny Herbert, the subject of monsoon tyres was discussed. These are new tyres that were developed this year after the torrentially treacherous Brazilian Grand Prix. They've got bigger, deeper cuts to enable them to cope with deeper water conditions without aquaplaning. I don't think they would have been right here, but nevertheless, the track is certainly very treacherous. Aquaplaning will result by crossing the rivers, and you need visibility to make sure that if you see a river, you back off the throttle, you straighten the steering wheel, and by doing that, you can reduce the risk of spinning off.
Lap 62, just 3 laps after this one for Michael Schumacher. No doubt about who is going to win the Spanish Grand Prix, provided he keeps going, and there's no reason to think that he won't, but it's still in doubt about who is going to finish second, as into another lap go. There is Lacey, second place. There is Villeneuve in third position. And this is turn 1, followed by the left-hander at turn 2. Frentzen is still in 4th place. Hakkinen is still in 5th position. Deniz is still in 6th place. Those are the only 6 runners left out of the 20 who started. And can Jacques Villeneuve catch, never mind get past Jean Alesi? I very much doubt it, because the problem now is to just stay on that razor's edge between staying on the track and giving it too much throttle and going off. And there is no point in doing that when there are 6 points there for Jean Alesi. There are 4 points there for Jacques Villeneuve, and there are 10 points for Michael Schumacher, who is now on his 63rd lap out of 65. So he's got less than 9 miles between him and the first Ferrari victory since approximately this time last year. It's been a long, long time. Schumacher voluntarily gave up the World Championship possibility with Benetton this year to face a new challenge, to take on a new challenge with Ferrari, who needed somebody of his caliber to provide the last brick in the wall that they were building, and he has certainly done it. So, lap 63. It doesn't really matter, but for academic reasons, I will tell you that the gap between Schumacher, who is leading, and Alesi, who is second, is now under a minute. It's 55 seconds to be exact. Schumacher has stopped twice with a different strategy to everybody else. Rubens Barrichello, of course, came in with car problems and is now retired from the race. And everybody is out except those top 6, of whom only 3 are on the same lap: Schumacher, Alesi and Villeneuve.
I wonder if that Ferrari mechanic was pointing out that little bit of plastic that's been stuck on the top of the onboard camera. above Schumacher's head. I'm sure it's been picked up from something on the track that's just hooked up there. It'll be harmless, we shouldn't worry about that. It might be something, some part of the camera, but somehow I doubt it. But beneath that, have a look at that helmet of Schumacher's. That's a special one that is used in IndyCar racing as well. Schumacher uses a new one each race. They cost nearly £2,000, but the special design means that the airflow over his head is more streamlined, it's square at the back, and that helps, albeit by a horsepower or two, the power of the engine, and keeps his head just a little bit more stable in the cockpit with all the turbulence that's going on. It's all these kind of things that contribute to eking out an advantage that comes into making him the most dominant driver of the current era.
Less than 6 miles now, about 5 miles before an historic victory for Schumacher and Ferrari. Villeneuve has now dropped back a bit from Jean Alesi to over 3 seconds, and I really don't think, charge as he may, he's got the slightest chance of getting past the Benetton in front of him. So it's beginning to look more and more like a Ferrari victory, a second place for Benetton and 6 points, and that would be Jean Alesi's second position this year, because he was in that place in Brazil. A third position for the Williams-Renault team to give them 4 Constructors' Championship points. In the points again for the Sauber team, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, 4th here at the moment as he finished in Monaco behind his teammate Johnny Herbert. 2 points for McLaren if Mika Hakkinen keeps going, and he has been lapped, so he's got 3 miles less to do than the top 3, and 1 point again for the Ligier team, who are in 5th position in the Constructors' Championship. But as I said earlier on, it would be Pedro Diniz's first ever World Championship point, and he does deserve it. He has driven hard and well, and to finish 6th here in these conditions would be no mean achievement. So Michael Schumacher is on his way now, and indeed goes to the roar of the crowd into his last lap.
Fortunes change so quickly in Formula One, such as the pressure upon drivers and equipment. Just 1 race ago, Schumacher was distraught, probably, going off on the very first lap, having been on pole position. Here, he was not on pole on the grid, but he was an excellent second on the grid, and third on the grid, but now he's driven the most remarkable race. This is the most dominating race performance we've had this year. Schumacher is earning every pound of the alleged £1 million he'll be earning for this race alone. Absolutely superb. Ferrari's first win, and they're going to be absolutely thrilled. Behind that, though, this time Alesi has had his car reliability stay with him. He might have won at Monaco, another one whose fortunes have changed so much. He's withstood the pressure from Villeneuve, who's also driven very well. He's made no mistake, and that's the crucial thing in treacherous conditions like that. He's sensibly hung back. He's not going to have a go for Alesi. But Frenson's 4th, maybe a distant 4th, but at least he's doing it in the spare car. Hackett and Diniz being there in the points, but no great credit to the drivers apart from staying on the track, or indeed the cars. But finally a disappointing, very disappointing race for Damon Hill. A race the weekend that started well, tremendous pole position, but sadly a succession of mistakes ended in retirement, and Damon's going to be determined to make up for that in the future to try and catch this man, Michael Schumacher, in his championship quest.
It is going to be an historic win for Schumacher, for Ferrari, and the first win ever for a Ferrari V10 engine. A quiet smile on the face of Jean Todt, which I'm sure will become a very broad one in a few seconds' time. Michael Schumacher has driven absolutely magnificently to underline enormously his World Championship status, and he enters now the last corner, and Michael Schumacher wins the Spanish Grand Prix after an absolutely superlative drive to give himself 10 World Championship points, to give Ferrari 10 World Championship points, to bring the great Maranello concern back right to the front of Formula One. And Jean Alesi there has got Jacques Villeneuve behind him in 3rd position. There is the Canadian, and Schumacher now is touring in on his victory lap. I can tell you that the sodden crowd in the grandstand stood up, waved their Ferrari flags and their red caps, and cheered Michael Schumacher to the echo But Lacey does indeed finish second for Benetton. Villeneuve does indeed finish third for Williams. And they are the only two, apart from Schumacher, to go the full race distance of 65 laps. As that's Nigel Stepney, the chief mechanic, the Englishman, one of the people I failed to mention in the international gallery earlier on. So, Englishman Nigel Stepney, who is the chief mechanic of Ferrari, has seen all his efforts and all his Maranello colleagues win here today, thanks to the supremacy, the brilliance of Michael Schumacher. So, Ferrari win, Benetton second, Williams third, a Sauber fourth, a McLaren fifth, a Ligier sixth, and 6 different constructors in the top 6. But a crushingly dominant victory for Ferrari, which was no more than they deserved, and thanks entirely not only to their efforts, but especially those of Michael Schumacher. Superb, absolutely brilliant. 10 World Championship points. He's only 2 World Championship points now, in third position, behind Jacques Villeneuve, who has closed the gap between himself and championship leader Damon Hill. Damon Hill now on 43 points, Villeneuve on 26. Schumacher is on 10 points for this win, giving him 26 points in all. And Villeneuve on 28 points. So, Heinz Harald Frentzen. So, let me just say that again. Damon Hill leads the World Championship, but we now have 2 people equal in second position, both of them on 26 points. Well, Jonathan, Ferrari have done everything that they needed to do. They've reached their win 1 race earlier than Schumacher said they would do, and it really is something that they richly deserve.
Very much so. I think it has to be said that had conditions been dry, I suspect that Williams would have won, and it probably would have been Damon Hill. But we've said before that the wet is a great leveller. Michael Schumacher is the best driver out there. He did not make mistakes. He was blisteringly fast all the way through. Race strategy played no significant part in this result. But I'm sure that whilst Williams in particular and Damon Hill will be aware of how the wet weather played into Schumacher's hands here, they'll also be aware that Ferrari and Schumacher are closing the gap and that they do have a performance advantage. The absolute delight there. He's a very expensive driver, but my goodness, he's worth it. He really is. And he's brought back Ferrari to the real focus, to the winning focus of Formula One. And in just 2 races' time, we believe, look at that, absolutely delighted. He is euphoric. He's taken a bit of a gamble, a big gamble. It may have been a lot of money. You can see that helmet there we were talking about. Look at it, swept back on it, the vertical, almost vertical back. It was a big risk, but the whole team are focused around him, built up their resources. Jean Todt, he's really done exactly what was required. In the overall scheme of things, the amount of money that goes into running a Grand Prix team is so much that investing the $25 million in Schumacher is only a small part of all the costs involved. And if in 2 races' time Ferrari find the second a lap, I understand that they have, we're going to see a very, very stiff challenge indeed to Damon Hill's championship lead and the Williams team generally.
Yes, Williams are up against it, no doubt at all about that. Ferrari have got these new parts coming, which are going to make them go even quicker. They've got what is, without doubt, the best driver in the world, Michael Schumacher. Put that lot together, and the psychological boost that they've got from this victory here in Spain, and they're going to be on their way. Williams will be wanting Renault to produce more power from their engine, but these are the only 2 concerns, really, that are in the running. Benetton just their second place today with Gerhard Berger out of the race. No finishes for Jordan. McLaren well out of the running with Mika Hakkinen lapped and David Coulthard taken out. That's got nothing to do with the performance of the car, I know. But Ferrari are in the ascendant and Williams are going to have to fight very, very hard indeed. So this is the end of the European rounds for a while, because the next race takes us over to Canada, a long-haul trip on June the 16th, and that was the race where Michael Schumacher said that he hopes to start winning. He's done it early, but Michael Schumacher is going to have Canadian Jacques Villeneuve against him in the Williams. We've seen how well he has gone here today in conditions which he's not used to driving in, and I think his drive was absolutely magnificent as the top men come out onto the podium, and the famous Schumacher leap which we saw with Benetton.
Cheerful winner. And His Royal Highness King Juan Carlos of Spain on the podium, waiting to present the awards.
As that great trophy presented to Michael Schumacher.
Second and third place driver, and now presenting the trophy to Jean Todt, the sporting director of Ferrari. Well done to Jean and all his team. Congratulations. Jean Todt offering the trophy to Michael Schumacher, and now Mr. Juan Antonio Samaranch, the president of the International Olympic Committee, will present the trophy to the second place driver, Jean Alesi, and also present the trophy to the third place driver, Jacques Villeneuve. Congratulations, gentlemen, and a great drive in incredibly difficult conditions. The champagne makes its way forward, and you certainly deserve this, although whether you want to get any wetter or not, I don't know. Well done, go for it! Getting a huge bar from Michael Schumacher.